Chapter 27, Cartel Wives.
Alabama, Mia. Valentine's Day 2009 was on a Thursday. But because Olivia and I only got to visit Peter and Junior on Fridays, we decided to celebrate the day after the holiday. I used to write Peter 10-page love letters at night after Bella was asleep, so I packed one up along with some new family photos I'd recently taken and got in my car. When we arrived and settled into the visiting area, I turned to Olivia and Junior with a plan. Can you distract the guards for a little bit? They agreed, then cornered them and immediately began talking. Peter, let's go to the bathroom, I whispered.
Uh-oh.
We can't, he answered.
Here go one of the bees. We're finding out, as far as the book tell it, this was Viv's idea.
Someone will catch us. I put my foot down. I don't care. It had been months since we'd made love, and we missed each other desperately. I knew a prison bathroom isn't the most romantic place to be with your husband, but we needed that closeness and would have done anything to get it. Plus, Peter needed to feel like a human being again, and honestly, so did I. A few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. Bella was barely 3 months old. I was shocked. But with a husband in prison and the rest of my life so uncertain, was I even just the tiniest bit worried or disappointed? Not for a second. My baby was a beautiful new beginning. In fact, having something so innocent growing inside me shielded me from what was happening to me and Olivia. The word was out about our husbands, and we'd been receiving threats.
Olivia. DEA agents were receiving intel and had been tapping phones for months. But sometime that winter, they'd intercepted a suspicious call. A group of armed men were standing outside a hair salon, waiting for someone they thought was me to come out so they could kidnap me. Junior and Peter's attorney, Joe, called me in a panic with the feds on the line.
Imagine you the wrong one. You're not even Val. You get snatched up, you know what I'm saying, by a bunch of dummies trying to come get you. You get snatched up. You got nothing to do with nothing. You got no answers. They wildin'.
And when I picked up the phone, I heard the fear in their voices. Liv, you're in danger, they said. People are after you. I hadn't been anywhere near the salon. The person inside looked a lot like me, but it was the wrong girl. The kidnappers were about to kick in the door, but the feds showed up and prevented anything from going down. Still, the whole incident scared the shit out of me. I knew the feds couldn't intercept every call, and they wouldn't always be there to save the day.
I'm pretty sure that was Saul.
Mia. The feds investigated one death threat after another against me and Olivia in the months after Peter and Junior were moved into the MCC. In fact, there were so many that I started to lose count. There was one incident that stood out the most. An informant gave information that Sergio Gomez had been staking out Olivia's house.
Oh, it wasn't Saul. This is Saul.
Armed and ready to kidnap her. The feds called us immediately, and they practically banned us from the state.
Yo, the crybaby killer is back. That's the type of parasite you can't get rid of, boy. This fool's trying to snatch up Val while they're in prison. You can't fuck up the movie. There's nothing you can do to fuck it up. The truth is stranger than fiction. This dude reared his little ugly head again. He popped up out of nowhere again. Saul, Sergio.
You girls cannot be here anymore, they said. The threats are coming in every direction, and we aren't going to be able to intercept every single one before it ends in tragedy. We think you should move to throw off anyone who's looking for you. It had become a job in and of itself to protect us, and they needed to focus their efforts on the cases they had to build. It didn't take much convincing. Olivia and I decided to leave town right away.
Olivia. We'd missed Junior and Peter's family since we'd been back in the States. While we'd gone straight to Chicago, they'd settled far away in Alabama because they wanted to be somewhere quiet and warm, far from Chicago.
Damn.
Besides the time Adrian had come to visit, it had been months since we'd seen them. We'd only been able to talk about Junior and Peter on the phone. They were going through the same emotions we were, and I didn't just think they could help us cope. I realized they might also be able to help me with Brandon. He'd been going through so much being away from his dad, and when we'd lived in Mexico, he'd always enjoyed being with Junior's family. He missed them, we all did, and I hoped being around family would help us feel closer to Junior. So we packed up our things.
You're lucky Armando was with you when you was running into these guys that the twins was rolling up. Because had the family been in Alabama at that point, or had he been in Alabama and not with you, could have been a big problem.
And my boys and I moved in with Daniela and Adrian, while Mia and Bella looked for their own place.
Mia. After 6 months in the MCC, Peter and Junior had been transferred to a county prison in Wisconsin, then to a federal facility in Kansas. We planned on visiting them every week. Life for them in Kansas was so much better, and Peter couldn't have been happier. The MCC had been so bad that any place else was going to feel like the Ritz-Carlton.
Olivia. In the middle of nowhere, Kansas, there were 50 or more prisoners housed at a federal prison. They were all informants protected under the Witness Protection Program, and everyone, except for Junior and Peter, had been convicted and sentenced. Some were mobsters, and others were drug dealers, but none were on the level of Peter and Junior. There are only a handful of these prisons in the country, and the government doesn't just place anyone who's worked with the feds there. You have to be a really big deal and be in an extremely dangerous situation.
So it's a rogues gallery of informants.
Mia. When Olivia and I visited Junior and Peter, there was no glass separating us from them, and there was no dirty black phone you'd have to speak through. Instead, we sat on chairs in a super tiny visiting room, and Brandon, Benjamin, and Bella could actually play because they had a small area for kids. The guards were so nice to us because they saw us every weekend, and realizing how family-oriented Peter and Junior were, they treated them well. They let them hold the babies, which they hadn't been able to do in Wisconsin. It certainly wasn't like being at home, but Junior and Peter said that if they could have served their whole time there, they would have.
Olivia. They weren't locked down 24/7, so they spent their days working out, writing love letters to us, signing extradition papers, and meeting with prosecutors and DEA agents when they were needed. Even though they worried so much about our safety, they were happy because they felt closer to us, with 300 phone minutes a month and visiting privileges every weekend. Plus, it may sound funny, but the company was better. It feels good to be around people and just talk about normal things that have nothing to do with business, Junior said. Junior's such a people person, and I knew he needed that socialization, and he loved our visits, which were finally regular. I rented an apartment in Kansas and would fly up there every Friday from Alabama, staying till Sunday. I didn't care if there was a blizzard or 15 inches of snow on the ground. We might as well buy our own snowplow to hook up to the front of our trucks, I joked with Mia, because nothing's going to stop us from getting to our visits.
You guys tell me, again, all of this talk that I hear, all of this puteria comments that I hear in the comments and that I read in the comments about how these gold diggers are always up to no good and they love, they love the clout and the game and they were the mastermind and this was all a play by them and all of this shit. Why them girls was going through blizzards to go see these dudes? Like, they could have just disconnected, made it very simple for themselves and let the boys figure it out for themselves in the joint. It happens all the time. Then you got those people that are willing to crawl up a mountain to get there. You know what I'm saying? Nobody accounts for that part. Everybody pushes this dramatic soap opera shit, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, we not talking about the fact that everywhere these dudes went, prison to prison, somehow these chicks moved there, got there, crawled there, and did what they had to do.
As much as I loved seeing Junior, It was so difficult to travel with my kids being so small. Benjamin always cried a lot on the flights, and people would give us dirty looks when he did. Prisons are never close to cities, so the drive from the airport there was 2 hours in the best of conditions, which they rarely were in winter. On Christmas, one of my flights was delayed because of snow, so I only got to spend 30 minutes with Junior. I didn't care. I would have driven across the country just to see him for 3 minutes. When I got back home on Sunday, I pretty much had to start repacking right away for the next weekend. I constantly felt like a truck had run over me, but I knew I depended on my visits as much as Junior did. They got me through my week. Sometimes, the travel made me despise my life, but Junior always kept me grounded. He'd remind me how blessed we were that we were alive and healthy and had each other. Most importantly, visits were the only time our boys had with their dad, and it was amazing to see the bond that grew every weekend.
I tell you what, it's a lot of mamas that wouldn't give a damn. I mean, they probably care, but they'll be like, but it's too much. I can't take it. I want them to know their father, but this is too much. I can't take it. Like, these two managed to get her done.
Brandon absolutely lives for Junior. Every year, when he blows out the candles on his birthday cake, his only wish is for his daddy to come home. Benjamin doesn't know what it's like to have Junior home, but like his brother, he loves him unconditionally, and when his birthday comes around, we count the years Junior's been gone. Still, seeing their dad in prison wasn't always easy for them. In fact, for Brandon, it was actually painful.
Mia. Brandon would break down every weekend, and Peter and I felt terrible watching it. We'd hear a cry that's hard to describe. It was like he was hurting inside, and that feeling was screaming to come out.
Olivia. Brandon was the only baby who remembered his dad outside of a prison wall, so he took it the hardest. He understood what it was like to miss someone so much that it physically hurts.
Mia. Life with their dads in prison was all the babies had ever known, and for my new baby, it was going to be the same. I knew it wasn't going to be easy to keep our family close, given the circumstances, but I kept telling myself, this is your life now, and this is just what you have to do. Sometimes it wasn't so bad. Compared to so many women who get pregnant with no steady partner and no support system, I had it good. In fact, Peter was already bending over backward to be involved with my pregnancy, and he had been since the beginning. Because I couldn't call Peter in prison, I had to wait for him to call me. To feel more involved in family life, Peter always noted all my appointments in his calendar, plus our family events and little occasions like the day Bella got her first tooth. The first few months after I found out I was pregnant, he stored up all his phone minutes, knowing he couldn't waste them since I had big doctor's visits coming up. The day I found out whether we were having a boy or a girl, I sat on my hands for what felt like forever till he called. I knew he'd marked it in his calendar. He just hadn't been given the opportunity to use the phone. Then my cell rang, and before he even had a chance to say hello, I started talking. Are you ready to teach your son how to play basketball? I'm having a son? He screamed. He was so loud the whole prison probably shook, and hearing him so happy made my heart sing. Right then, I needed that pure joy, that crazy excitement, because what I refused to tell my husband was that I was having a really, really hard time living with his family in Alabama.
Olivia. Everyone's lives had completely changed when we left Mexico, but Mia and I rolled with it. Sure, it was hard, but not because we didn't have the material things we were used to, and certainly not because we regretted what Peter and Junior had done. We were proud of them. We just missed our husbands terribly and worried constantly that we were going to be killed by the cartels, who had the money and the means to track us down. Peter and Junior's family, on the other hand, couldn't stand the fact that they started working for the government. While it brought out the best in us, it was just the opposite for them.
Hmm.
Mia. Peter and Junior had been their family's meal tickets. With them gone, and in such a shameful way, their parents and siblings complained all the time. There was constant fighting. When Peter and Junior told their family they had to get jobs like normal people do, I heard my in-laws complain. What kind of job do they expect us to do? They asked, genuinely confused and angry. They were just paralyzed, sitting around the house doing next to nothing.
Olivia. Junior and Peter had enabled their family members. They were so used to living in Mexico, where you pay cash for everything. In the United States, you have to have credit, and you need references to rent a house. Peter's dad was a convicted felon who'd been a fugitive for years. He wasn't a landlord's dream tenant, and he sure as hell wasn't going to get a credit card to make him look better on paper. Credit was for poor people, not him.
Mia. I don't blame them for being so self-involved, but I hated that they couldn't see how depressed I was. They complained constantly to me, assuming that I could do something, when all the while I was thinking, how can I fix anything when I'm as lost as you are?
Well, if we're talking about the parents they ain't thinking about no depression. That shit wasn't a word in their era.
My parents were so overprotective when it came to me and Bella, and I knew they would have come and packed me up in a day if I'd asked them to. But I was too ashamed to tell them that I was at my very worst. I even shied away from talking to Peter about it, since I knew all he wanted was for me to be happy. Adrian and Daniela would check on me from time to time, but they had their own lives. I felt so alone, living in my apartment with Bella, and I struggled every day. Bella was a huge baby. I'm tiny, and she was half as big as I was. People would see us out and say, "Is that your baby, or are you babysitting for someone?" With my belly, I could hardly pick her up. In that awful heat, I'd be pouring sweat. The best I could do was just let Bella float in a little raft in the pool all day to cool us down and tire her out. At night, I'd cook a healthy dinner for myself, we'd take a long bath, and I'd read to her. Then I'd turn on the television, let Bella fall asleep in my arms, then cry silently to myself. In the morning, I could hardly get up, but I'd force myself to pick up Bella and go out and run errands. As soon as I put her in her car seat, she'd already be dripping in sweat. Yet no one in Peter's family offered to help me. No one.
Olivia. They just didn't understand why Junior and Peter were doing what they were doing, and it consumed them.
It's past your understanding already. You already in the mix. You've already benefited from what they're doing in the sense that you got your way to the United States. You know what I'm saying? The people that are hunting you in Mexico, you in the United States, you've already benefited from what they're doing. It doesn't matter if you understand. The fact is, it's what it is. It's time to work. It's time to get money. Being dumbfounded don't benefit nobody.
It was like they didn't have time and energy to consider anyone but themselves, and they couldn't see the big picture. They didn't think about Peter and Junior, that if they hadn't made the decision they had, they'd be dead or in prison for life. My father-in-law took it the worst. To him, Junior and Peter becoming snitches was the most horrible thing they'd ever done. When he'd found out his sons were cooperating, he'd screamed, "You're both cowards!" and stormed out of the house. They were the last words he'd spoken in the months before they'd turned themselves in, and since their dad never visited them in prison, it was one of the last memories they had of him.
Crazy.
It hurt them deeply. Peter and Junior knew that what they were doing was right, but the little boys inside of them still wanted their dad's approval. I didn't know what to feel because I loved my father-in-law, but I felt terrible for what he'd said to Junior and Peter. Being called cowards broke their hearts. But I didn't hold it against my father-in-law. It was just the way he'd been raised.
Mia. In my family, we always greet each other with a hug and a kiss. That's just what we do. We say goodbye with a hug and a kiss, too. My dad's never been anything but affectionate and loving with me. Always smiling and pleasant to be around. Sure, he gets upset about things and speaks his mind, but he's not an angry guy. He's manly, but not macho. That's the opposite of Peter's dad. Senor always had this way about him that I feared right from the first time I met him. He never smiled, and at dinner he'd get really stern and pound his fist on the table when he'd talk. I'd think, oh my goodness, is he mad? He wasn't, or usually wasn't.
Me either.
He was just passionate.
That's my life story right there. Passion being mistaken for aggression.
For the first year or so I knew my father-in-law, our conversations consisted of good morning and good night. That was it. There was no small talk. There was no, hi, are you having a good day? And there was certainly no hugging or kissing when we saw each other. We were all business. At the time, I thought, maybe he's so unfriendly because he already has so many sons-in-law and daughters-in-law, and having another is no biggie. But now I realize that's just the way he was. He was set in his ways. Peter understood this, and he went with it and spoke to him like a friend. They'd sometimes argue, usually about money, and I'd keep my mouth shut the whole time. When it was over and his dad had stormed off into another room, I'd say, look what just happened. You can't get out of line with your dad. Peter would laugh. That's just how he is, Mia. He's not really mad. It's just how he is.
Olivia. My father-in-law was a typical old-school Mexican man. He was completely different than my dad, who was encouraging and supportive and wanted me to be smart and independent like my mom. Still, I got along with my father-in-law, and I actually really understood him. I never judged him, and I grew to love him. When I first came on the scene, I wasn't afraid to be as strong as him. I spoke my mind, and over the years, I'd call him out if I thought he did something wrong. Sometimes it wasn't pretty, but I think he appreciated that someone was having a real conversation with him, actually paying attention to him, even if it was more of a debate. He wouldn't really argue with me. He'd just smirk and smile to himself. He thought I was funny. Once, he woke up my mother-in-law after one of our late-night debates. "Olivia is muy cabrona," he said, meaning I was a real badass bitch who didn't take no shit. My mother-in-law just smiled, rolled over, and went back to sleep.
Mia. Despite my initial hesitation, I grew to love my father-in-law. Not just because he was family, but because I started to understand him. He began to seem like a normal person, not the stereotypical macho Mexican guy he tried to make himself out to be. When I first moved to San Juan, Peter started buying horses. His hobby soon became my hobby, and our bonding time began to involve us driving to different ranches to look at horses. 9 times out of 10, his parents would come with us. Once, we all traveled together to a ranch about 2 hours away. As we drove up to the front gate, Senor was greeted by a worker who opened his arms up to him. "Oh, Margarito! Buenos dias, how are you?" the man said. "Very good, and very excited to be here." My father-in-law looked genuinely thrilled. We got in the back of the worker's pickup truck and drove into an overgrown field. The ground was so...
You're definitely always going to see more charisma when they're around friends and associates than you're going to see around family, that generation.
Tangled up with grass that you couldn't really see where you were going, but we got out of the truck and started walking anyway. About 10 steps in, the rancher opened his palm, which he'd filled with oats. All of a sudden, wild, beautiful horses came out from behind the trees like magic and began making their way through the grass toward us. I looked over at my father-in-law, and I saw his eyes light up. He began to smile, completely in awe. I don't think I'd ever seen him melt like that.
The duality of
Right
man.
there and then I saw his softer side, and for the first time, I felt close to him. Even though I was so scared of him most of the time, at that moment, we were close. I try to remember those moments now when I think about him.
Olivia. My father-in-law loved his grandchildren, especially Benjamin and Bella. In Mexico, when you're light-skinned or have blonde hair or blue eyes, people are like, wow. Benjamin and Bella are fair-skinned, and my father-in-law would always stare at them and say, they're beautiful, like porcelain dolls. He loved to hold Benjamin and hug him, and he'd sing to Bella until she fell asleep. He was the perfect grandfather to them at a time when they didn't really have their fathers, or at least that constant male presence. That's why I didn't understand why he wanted to leave. He had everything: a family, grandchildren he loved, and most of all, safety. No one knew where he was in Alabama, and chances were good that no one was going to come after him. But he was angry with his sons for being snitches, for taking him away from his other family, and most of all, for making him flee from his home.
Mia. When you live in Mexico, you realize pretty quickly that there are people who never want to leave. They love their town, and they love their country. That's how my father-in-law was.
Olivia. That longing for home started before he'd gone back to America. In fact, after my father-in-law returned from his kidnapping, Peter and Junior bought him and my mother-in-law a mansion near our home in Guadalajara. They convinced them to leave San Juan, saying it wasn't safe. I completely furnished and decorated the mansion beautifully, and we threw a massive housewarming party for them around Christmas 2006, with a huge Christmas tree, a red sparkly bow on the door, and a 12-man mariachi band serenading them as they drove up to their new house. That night, my father-in-law was in tears, remembering how different his last Christmas had been. But days later, he soured. He started talking about how much he missed San Juan, and he began complaining about being away from home to anyone who would listen.
Mia.
Made up his mind.
That was the way he was in Alabama, too. Never mind that he had a wife he'd been married to for almost 50 years and grandkids who adored him and were there almost daily. From the moment he crossed the border into the United States, he began talking about going back. Something was calling him home, and no one was going to tell him otherwise.
Olivia. A few weeks after I moved to Alabama, I went over to my in-laws' house. No one answered the door, so I walked to the back. There, I saw my father-in-law, sitting by himself in a chair in the garden. He was staring at some flowers, deep in thought. I considered going through the gate to talk to him, but I was afraid he was going to tell me how disappointed he was in his sons. I was always defensive when it came to Junior and Peter, and the last thing I wanted to do was say something I'd regret to my father-in-law.
Probably the last time she saw him.
Suddenly, Adrian approached me. He'd come from the other side of the house, and he'd just seen me observing his dad. I looked at Adrian and lowered my voice. He's going to leave. He doesn't want to be here. You're crazy, Adrian said. But I wasn't. I knew what I knew, and I couldn't explain why. A few days later, in late March 2009, Adrian called me. My dad is gone, he said. He just picked up and left. Margarito Flores Sr. had packed a small bag and driven away in his car that morning. Adrian and I didn't discuss it, but we knew where he'd gone and why he hadn't taken much with him. Apparently, everything he needed was back home in Mexico. How could he do this to my mother-in-law? I thought. How could he do this to his sons? If something happens to him, they won't be able to live with themselves. He can't go back, I said to Adrian. The cartels are going to find him and kill him. What the fuck is wrong with him?
I wonder how quick it was.
There's nothing we can do, Liv, Adrian said. He's a grown man, and he knows what can happen to him. You know how he is. No one could have changed his mind. Even though I knew he was right, I still felt guilty for not trying. No one could tell my father-in-law shit, not Adrian, and especially not me. When he had his mind made up about something, that was just going to be the way it was. Damn the consequences.
Mia. He didn't seem to mind that Mexico was a war zone. The cartel wars were raging, and in fact, they'd been escalating the entire time Peter and Junior had been cooperating. On May 9th, 2008, Arturo Beltran Leyva's BLO army had sprayed Chapo's son, Edgar's car, with 200 bullets, killing him. In retaliation, Chapo began an all-out battle on the streets of Culiacan, complete with firefights and shootouts, and there was a curfew so innocent people could avoid getting killed. But the danger now wasn't just from random gunfire. Cartel members wanted to get revenge on Peter and Junior, and if that meant targeting their family, that was just fine.
Olivia. Margarito Sr. didn't care, though. In Mexico, there was a little church he liked to walk around in. In Mexico, he could speak Spanish. In Alabama, he lived in the suburbs, and there was no corner store you could walk to. In Alabama, there were no people hanging out in the plaza. There were no stories. There was no past. He'd gone back to Mexico to have all of that again.
Mia. We didn't hear anything for over a month. Then, one of the U.S. attorneys called Peter and Junior. "We found your dad's car in the desert in Sinaloa," the lawyer said. "It had a note on the windshield, warning both of you to keep your mouths shut." There was no blood in the car, no bullet holes, and no other evidence of foul play. But I know kidnappings. I've lived through one of my own, and 2 of my husband's. Kidnappers don't kill you in your car. They pull you out, put you in another car, and take you somewhere else. Sometimes the police will find your body, but most of the time they don't. My father-in-law fell into the latter category. He just vanished into thin air. Olivia and I visited our husbands in prison that weekend. "It's all our fault," Peter said. "We did this." Junior was crying. "My poor mother. She's all alone now, and it's because of us." "It's not. Please stop blaming yourselves," I pleaded. I was lying, though. Their dad would have lived if they hadn't become informants. He'd still be in Mexico, betting hundreds of thousands of dollars on the horses, enjoying his wife's cooking.
Would he, though? You would have had to make a choice at that point between cartels and worked for one of them, or the other one was going to come for the whole family. So would he be the first one that they went after or not? Who knows?
Stealing hours here and there with his second family, sitting on the beach in front of his house on a beautiful day and pounding his fists on the dinner table. I missed him that day, and I've missed him every day since. We'll never know what happened. Margarito Flores' death was just one of thousands that year during the cartel wars, but we just pray that he didn't suffer. We hope that he went in peace.
Also in the chat said they got to fuck with them. Yeah, at the end of the day, there's 2 ways that game ends, and both of those ways was coming at them at the same time. Death and prison. And at that point, the old man made up his mind. You know, there's a lot of men in here. You know, there's not many people that could push us off our square and make us change our mind. That has to come from within. That has to be something that you want to do. He was going to make his decision, and he was going to go. Here we go. Chapter 28, Cartel Wives.
Wives at War. Olivia. On August 20th, 2009, the U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder unsealed the indictments against Junior and Peter. But they weren't alone. He also announced the charges against El Chapo, El Mayo, Arturo Beltran Leiva, 16 members of Junior and Peter's Chicago-based crew, and assorted hitmen, lieutenants, and other cartel members. In a total of 15 indictments, 46 men, with nicknames like Skinny, Ron Ron, and Grandpa, were charged,
Not
all
Ron Ron.
because of Peter and Junior.
What y'all do?
Mia. While hauling in the U.S. operatives was relatively easy, extraditing the Mexican cartel players was going to be harder. Extraditions require reams of paperwork, months and months of time, and the full cooperation of the Mexican government. The feds were hoping they could do it within a few years. After all, they didn't just want to strangle the flow of narcotics into the United States. They also wanted to help Mexico end its cartel wars.
Olivia. So much was happening in her husband's cases and all over Mexico, but unfortunately, Mia and I weren't talking to each other about any of it. By fall of 2009, we were waging our own war. Both of us were unhappy, and neither of us knew how to deal with our husbands not being with us. So we took it out on each other, and for the stupidest of reasons. I'd stayed friends with Peter's ex, Angela, who was the mother of his older daughter, Sophia. Whenever I was in Chicago, I'd drop by her house, visit, and check on Sophia.
That'll do it.
Brandon was close to his cousin, and so was I. I'd been around her since she was born, and I looked at her like a daughter. Mia knew I still talked to Angela, and it was uncomfortable for her. She probably didn't want Angela to know certain things, or she didn't want me letting anyone else muddy the waters.
No
Or
pillow
maybe
talk.
she
No pillow talk. That's it right there. She's hinting to it. No pillow
imagined
talk.
I was confiding in her, breaking our circle of trust.
Mia. In a lot of Latin families, you leave your exes in the past. That goes for your husband's ex-girlfriend, too. We're not accustomed to seeing blended families with exes, and bad feelings and harsh words are common, even expected. And when you break up with someone, your family is supposed to cut them off. That's the way I was raised, and it's the reason I was upset with Olivia. As a woman and a wife, I felt betrayed that she was still talking with Peter's ex. When we made the decision to change our lives, we made it as a family, and I felt as if she abandoned me at my
Oh, my bad.
most vulnerable time. When I love someone, I love them hard, and I never turn my back on them. I worried that our sisterhood wasn't good enough, and that we were going to have to live this crazy life without each other.
Olivia.
Y'all wasn't supposed to be talking to nobody at that point anyway. Y'all was hot. Y'all supposed to be locked in the crib watching Golden Girls. None of this shit arguing over who's talking to who.
At such a sensitive point in our lives, we should have been there for each other, like sisters. So I couldn't understand why Mia was letting something like this come between us. I thought she was being so controlling. Junior and I would talk all the time about what was going on. She's younger than me and she's just being immature, I'd say to him. I just hope you work it out soon, he'd answer. Junior had never had a hard time letting me know when I was wrong, and vice versa. That's part of why we made such a good team. But since he'd been locked up, the last thing he wanted to do was fight with me. He stayed quiet and sided with me. It started coming between him and Peter. They'd always seen eye to eye, were always on the same page. But when it came to us, they'd do anything to make us happy. It got so bad that when Mia and I would visit our husbands in Kansas, we'd sit on opposite sides of the visiting area. The room was tiny too, like 10 feet by 12 feet, and we wouldn't even say hi to each other. Benjamin would toddle over to Bella to try to play with her, but it still didn't break the ice.
Mia. When I hold a grudge against someone, I hang on to it forever. People think I'm sweet and delicate because I'm so soft-spoken and reserved, but inside, I'm tough as nails. I usually have my guard up. The weekend before I was scheduled to deliver my baby, I don't think I've ever been so defensive. I went to visit Peter on Sunday, like I always did. I decided to move to Kansas to be close to his prison. I wasn't going back to Alabama if my life depended on it. I would have rather been on my own than be someplace where people were supposed to be helping me but weren't. I was already feeling happier, but talking to Peter 2 days before having my baby, knowing he wouldn't be there, set me back. "I'm just so sorry I can't be there for you, that I can't be there for my boy being born," he said. I'd always wanted a boy and a girl, so the fact that I was having a son was pretty much everything I'd ever wished for. I prayed every night that he'd be healthy, and I told myself that even though Peter wasn't going to be in the hospital with me, nothing was going to take my happiness away.
That had to be an emotional clusterbuck because Spanish woman, pregnant, the circumstances they're under, he's not going to be there. He's going to catch the brunt of it sometimes. She's catching the brunt of it. That's a whole lot of emotionality going on in there, boy. A lot.
Still, with Peter sitting there apologizing, I felt completely alone. I needed him more than ever, but there was nothing he could do. "It's okay, Peter," I lied. "I'm not thinking of myself. I've got a baby at home and a baby on the way that need me. I'll be fine." We both started crying, and he kissed me goodbye. Then Olivia walked into the room with Brandon and Benjamin.
Olivia. When I saw Mia sitting in that little visiting room, I thought, what kind of person am I that I'm not going to be there for her? She's having a baby alone, for God's sake. I started to walk toward her, but she refused to look at me, and I backed off. We sat on opposite sides of the room all afternoon, the tension between us growing minute by minute. When I left and got in my car, I didn't feel relieved to be away from such an uncomfortable situation. In fact, I felt guiltier than ever. So I picked up the phone and called her, and much to my surprise, she answered. "Mia," I said, "I love you, and I want to be there for you when you have the baby." She didn't say a thing. "I'm so sorry for everything I've done or said, and if you want me there, I'd like to go to the hospital to be with you." There was more silence, but I wasn't giving up. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you during your pregnancy. I can't imagine how hard this has been for you, and I'm truly sorry for everything you're going through. I know Peter can't be there for you, and I know that I'm the closest thing that you have to him, so I genuinely want to go." I kept on. "I'd like to go to the hospital and be there for the birth of my nephew. Please let me. Please."
The awkward silence. Jonathan in the chat said the situation is awkward all the way around. Hell yeah, especially that silence. Hey, but she's trucking on. She's doing the family thing, I guess.
Mia must have been sick of the sound of my voice because she finally broke the silence. True to form, she was polite. I don't think a day's gone by when she hasn't been sweet and courteous. "Thank you for calling," she said. "It means a lot to me." She paused. "But I'm going to have this baby alone." Then she hung up the phone.
Damn.
Mia. My mom, dad, and a few of my aunts flew in from Chicago to be with me for the birth of my baby boy. And the morning we walked into the hospital, I decided I wasn't going to let the hardest time in my life consume my moment. Even with all the chaos in my life, being a mother kept me grounded, and watching my babies grow masked my sadness. So when I first saw Blake, with his curly blonde hair and light eyes, it was the most beautiful experience of my life, other than having Bella. He was perfect. Such a good baby with a smile that was absolutely beautiful. I was in love and finally felt complete. And I thought to myself, I was put on this earth to be their mom, so I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to do all the normal things that normal parents do, and I'm going to protect them at all costs. I'd set up a nursery for Blake, and everything in it was perfectly in order for his arrival home. But in the middle of our first night out of the hospital, I dragged his crib into my room because I couldn't bear to have him away from me. I realized right then I never wanted to leave Bella or Blake, not for one moment. When I went to see Peter the week after Blake was born, I walked in the visiting room with the baby in the car seat and Bella strapped to me and the baby Bjorn. Peter was waiting by the door, and he had a look of disbelief on his face.
No missing the car seat.
He took Blake out of his baby seat and pressed his face against his. I love you, baby boy. From that moment on, they had a connection no one could break.
Olivia. I was feeling so guilty about Mia. I kept wishing I'd seen things her way and had honored her wishes. Not respecting Mia's feelings had tarnished our sisterhood. Even though I hadn't been trying to be malicious, I'd caused her heartache, and I regretted that. Worse, since Blake had been born, I hadn't even spent time with him. I'd just seen him across the visiting room, bundled up in his little car seat like a tiny angel, melting all our hearts. I hated not picking him up, and I hated that I hadn't even congratulated Mia. Just by her look alone, I knew she didn't want me near her or my baby nephew. But I couldn't stop thinking.
Now that's beefing right there. I don't even want you near the baby type shit. Beefing. Jonathan said if they make a movie about this book, I don't think they capture what the book is putting out. Man, it's no easy task, but this story tells itself. I believe it could be done. I believe the time for it is primed right now because all of these shows are based around all of this stuff, and this is a big side of the story that nobody knows yet through a scripted show. You know what I'm saying? Because out there is Narcos Mexico, El Chapo, last night, Griselda, all of this stuff, it's primed. It's primed for a series because this story tells itself, man. Between this and what you hear in Surviving El Chapo and the stuff that you haven't heard from them publicly, story tells itself.
She and I are going through something no one else in the world understands, yet we can't work out our problems together. I was determined to make it right. Unfortunately, with her refusing to talk to me, I just didn't know how. Then, in March 2010, something terrible happened that forced her to make the first move.
Mia. In the federal unit where Junior and Pete were housed, officials turned on the phones at 6 a.m. One morning in March, the sun wasn't even up when my cell started ringing. It was Peter, and he was frantic. "They've taken Junior away," he said. I'd been half asleep when I answered, but hearing Peter's words made me jump out of bed. "Where?" I asked. "I have no idea, but they just took him and not both of us." I wanted to calm him down, but I was scared shitless. Peter kept talking, his voice shaking. "We both woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of trucks. We could see them out our cell window, 10 Suburbans with their brights on. This crowd of U.S. Marshals came into our cell and just took him. I kept shouting at them, 'Where are you taking him?' But they wouldn't say. Is he coming back? They acted like he would be, but I know he's not." Peter and Junior had rarely been apart since the day they were born. Especially in prison, they were each other's support system, the only thing that made the days bearable. I was devastated, probably as much as he was, and I knew Olivia would be crushed. When I hung up with Peter, I called her immediately.
Olivia. It was good to hear Mia's voice, and while it wasn't too warm or friendly, it was clear she was about to tell me something important. "Peter told me they took Junior out of prison last night," she said. I practically jumped out of my skin. "What do you mean? Where is he?" I panicked. "Peter doesn't know where he's gone. No one would tell him anything." We talked for a few more minutes. Then I hung up and tried to figure out what to do. I was totally torn into pieces, not knowing what was going on with my husband, desperate for answers.
I might be naive, but I think they was gonna separate them anyway. I think that was just gonna be part of the protocol, regardless of what happened. They was gonna find a way to get them apart. They was done giving them preferential treatment, and that's what they thought that was. You know what I'm saying? That's what the feds thought that was.
And I lay down on the floor in a ball and cried my eyes out. I was so worried about Junior being alone. He and Peter had never really been apart, and they needed each other now more than ever. I found out a few days later the U.S. Marshals had transferred Junior to the New York Metropolitan Correctional Center. They'd locked down the airport, placed him on a private plane, like the one in the movie Con Air, and when it landed, the feds shut down a tunnel into Manhattan so they could drive him solo to the MCC. I knew that given the money and manpower it took to move him, he'd be at the MCC for a long time.
Mia. The reason for the move was because of a mix-up. In Kansas, Peter had decided to show the whole world how much he loved me by putting up 2 enormous billboards near the highway exit we took on visiting days. In big, bold type, the first said, "Marrying you was a dream come true." And the second read, "I love you today, tomorrow, and forever. Your grateful husband." They didn't have any photos or my name on them, but Peter told me they were for me. And I thought it was just the cutest thing. It topped almost anything romantic he'd ever done. The feds didn't feel the same. We're not sure why they were so angry, but apparently that kind of gesture was against their rules. Unfortunately, they didn't ask Peter or Junior. They just assumed that Junior was behind the billboards. They were furious and decided to transfer him. By the time they realized they'd punished the wrong brother, it was too late. The Bureau of Prisons was so upset by the mistake that they decided never again to house them together. And now, they even have a rule that identical twins can't be in the same facility.
How stupid are humans, man? That, listen, even identical twins, there's ways to separate them if you're paying attention. But people ain't walking through life paying attention. Everybody walking through life with blinders on. You know what I'm saying? If you're a system as big as the prison system, and you can't handle, having a set of twins on your floor, like, I don't understand what you people are doing. You can't pronounce names, and you call everybody else fucking stupid. You know what I'm saying? You can't pronounce names. You can't differentiate between two human beings and their paperwork and their numbers and all of these systems that you got in play. You can't figure out which is which. Like, what is wrong with y'all? And divide and conquer has always been what the government is about, and they try to break each other down. Yeah, I could see that. I could see them separating them on some. Oh, you wanna play games and you wanna get billboards? Cool, we separate you. But sending the wrong guy, they tweaked. Y'all can't even handle just one set of twins. It's not like you had 10 set of twins and y'all was juggling information. You had one set of twins that you had to administer and logistically get them safely between point A and point B, and you managed to fuck that up. I don't get it.
Olivia. The New York MCC wasn't much better than the one in Chicago. Junior had no phone privileges, so for the few months I had to wait for an authorized visit, Junior and I had zero communication, and I fell into a depression. On our first visit, we were only allowed 3 hours together. That was the rule. No weekend, all-day family sessions like we'd had in Kansas. When I laid eyes on Junior, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He'd dropped 20 pounds and looked sick and pale, like he was about to break into pieces. He told me he wasn't eating the food because the kitchen staff were inmates who knew their floor housed snitches, so they urinated or put feces in it. Junior never complained, but he was at his lowest, his breaking point, and we both cried the entire visit. An hour into our visit, a guard came into the room. "Time's up," he said. "But we have 3 hours. It's been an hour," I said as calmly as I could. "We only have to give you an hour. Time to go." The guard walked up to Junior and led him away before I'd even had a chance to kiss him goodbye.
It's like guards are only aware and awake when it's time to, screw somebody over. You know what I mean? You can't administrate one set of twins, right? You lose the wrong one. You get the wrong one sent to the wrong joint, right? And all of a sudden you got to change the rules because you people are not smart enough to deal with twins. How about the case of the guy that there was a guy in a joint, and I have to say this very carefully because of YouTube, so y'all try to follow, read between the lines with me. There was a guy in the joint, and he took over one of those control pods, right? He took over one of those control pods with a guard in there, and he was able to have his way from like 9:30 p.m. to like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that, 4 o'clock in the morning. And at no point did anybody walk in there. Nobody did a walkthrough. No checks and balances. No radio checks. No nothing, So it's like everybody's asleep on the job everywhere you go. The worker at the DMV is the same worker in the prison, same worker, you know what I'm saying? Like, people just phoning it in. They're not even paying attention. You're changing rules because you can't handle twins. Like, what? That's the first set of twins that ever went to jail before? Like, what are we talking about?
For the next 6 months, my boys and I flew to see Junior once a week, and half the time they cut our visits short. Once Junior looked out his cell window and saw me and the kids standing in the pouring rain, waiting for a cab after we'd left the building, and he broke down. He felt so guilty we were flying halfway across the country once a week and going through so much that he begged me to stop coming. I refused. After that, the first thing he'd always say when I came to visit was, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm putting you through this." He constantly apologized that he'd missed seeing Benjamin for months, when he was still so small, and he hated that Brandon cried when he was led out of the room. But most of all, he missed his brother. Being separated from Peter was the hardest thing he'd ever experienced. Since Junior had no phone privileges, I wrote him every single day. I wanted him to feel close to us, but in reality, my letters helped me feel close to him. They were deep and intimate, and they made me remember things that made me miss him even more. When I wasn't writing letters, I called Junior's lawyers and the U.S. attorneys and begged them to do something for him. I even went to the extreme of hiring another attorney because I just needed to do something, anything, to help Junior. I had to fix his situation, so I became a total nuisance, but I didn't care. All I wanted was for Junior to get out of that fucking place. I had no one to talk to either. No one in the world understood what I was going through except for Mia, and she and I were still distant.
Mia. Holding a grudge against Olivia just wasn't worth it to me anymore. I was too tired. I missed the family we had and the special bond we shared.
Yeah, when
and
you
I
ain't got
hated
nothing
that
left,
our fight had pulled.
When you ain't got nothing left, man, you need that. Especially if it's genuine. If y'all beefing over bullshit. When it's all you got, it's all you got.
I missed the family we had and the special bond we shared, and I hated that our fight had pulled Peter and Junior apart. Olivia and I had been through the very worst and the very best times together, and the fact that we'd let anything come between us was just stupid. I wanted my sister back. And when she called one day, several months into Junior's time at the New York MCC, I almost jumped for joy.
Olivia. She answered my call on the first ring, and I started talking a mile a minute. I was never trying to hurt you, but I know I did, and I'm sorry. Mia, I want to make things right. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. I realize that if I don't give in to your feelings, things are never going to be okay. Okay? So please, know I value our friendship more than anything. Not to mention that Junior and Peter need each other. And we're the only ones that can keep them close. We all need each other. Stop, Mia said. I forgive you. Let's put this behind us and move on. I've missed you. I've missed you so much. When we hung up the phone a few minutes later, we were both sobbing.
Mia, I just had to let it go. I did what I had to do, and for one of the first times in my life, I didn't do it for Peter. I did it for myself and for Olivia.
Olivia. It took time, but we mended our friendship. Finally, I had my sister back, and thank God I did because things were about to get crazy for both of us again.
So they was beefing, huh? She said, I'm gonna have this baby by myself. Good. Straight. Salutes. The deals got done, the names got on the paper, people got arrested, and then the extradition process for the rest of them started. Let's see how far that goes. The fact that human beings, criminal or not, have to worry about human waste being in their food in prisons just as stupid as prisons not being able to logistically handle administrating a set of twins, one set of twins. You want to call everybody else stupid. Like, stop it. All right, y'all, we going in. Chapter 29, Cartel Wide.
Forfeiture. Mia. In the fall of 2010, almost 2 years after we'd left Mexico, Olivia and I definitely weren't living the same way we had in Mexico, with maids and new jewelry every month and garages full of fancy cars. But we had money, and we didn't realize there was anything wrong with that.
Olivia. When we'd crossed the border, we had nothing but the clothes on our backs and enough cash to buy food and gas. Knowing that we had to live on something, we picked up some money. I'll be honest, it was millions of dollars. But when you lived the way we lived in Mexico, that kind of money doesn't seem abnormal. We'd actually be downsizing in the United States.
It's normal money.
Plus, we thought, how else are we supposed to support ourselves while we were in hiding? In our minds, we weren't doing anything wrong.
Mia.
All right, let's forget about y'all's minds, all right? I want to think about how the feds think about it. How do they think about it? Like, how do they want these people to live? You're not cutting them a stipend. It's not like they're on the payroll like the crybaby killer was. Saul.
Mia. We'd known for a long time that the court was going to order our husbands to forfeit money, goods, and property at their sentencing.
Right.
But that was most likely years away. And while we knew it was possible that we'd have to give up some stuff sooner rather than later as part of the administrative process, we never dreamed the government wouldn't give us notice. Unfortunately, the process and what happened because of it couldn't have been rockier.
Olivia.
Chucky says Saul got more than them, right? 800 stacks. They got like 500. But that 500 was 500 that, of their money that they said they offered up to the feds. The feds didn't accept it. So they just lived off of it. But Buddy got cut checks. He's on a payroll slip. Paga. They paid him out. Sent him to the check cashing joint every day. But I guess they expected them to take their ass to Burger King and get a job. Imagine if the girls would have started hustling right then and there and got popped off. They was on their own at that point. So probably is the answer. Go get a fucking Burger King job. It's crazy. That wasn't happening. Boy, go dig up a bag. We going shopping. We need some shit.
One morning in September 2010, I'd just dropped off Brandon at preschool. Benjamin was in the back seat in his car seat, and I kept looking in the rearview mirror like I always did. Suddenly, I noticed something didn't seem right. I just switched lanes, and the pickup truck behind me had put on his turn signal and edged in right behind me. My normal route home was taking the main street in town, but I instead got on the expressway. As I took the entrance ramp, so did that damn truck. I put my foot on the gas and accelerated, and he sped up just as fast as I did.
Damn your ass.
I was starting to sweat, and my heart was racing, so I gunned it, moved 2 lanes to the right, and took an exit off the highway. The pickup was a few cars back, but it exited too. Then suddenly, I noticed something. There wasn't just one pickup. There were 3, and all of them had blacked out windows. I continued onto an access road and then got back on the expressway. Oh my God, I thought, this is it. They've found me and they're going to kill me. I accelerated to about 120 miles an hour and started zigzagging to get through traffic, even jumping into the emergency lane with my gas pedal all the way down. I kept thinking, if I crash, I'm going to flip this truck over and my son and I are going to die. I pulled off the expressway once again. I couldn't see the trucks anymore, so I moved off onto a side street. As I stopped and looked at the beat-up houses on either side of the street, I suddenly realized, oh shit, this neighborhood is bad news. I'm sticking out like a sore thumb in a Range Rover. Shaking, I put the car in drive and pulled into a nearby 7-Eleven, then just sat with the motor still running. I idled there for maybe 3 minutes, scanning left, then right, and looking in my rearview mirror. Believe it or not, Benjamin was sound asleep. Then, out of nowhere, I saw the 3 pickup trucks coming down the road behind me.
3 pickup trucks.
I put the car in drive and floored the gas, and the pickups started chasing me again. All that was going through my head was, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. My phone rang. I looked down at the screen and saw that it was Adrian. Someone's trying to kill me, I screamed when I answered. 3 trucks are following me. Olivia, he yelled.
That's me,
It's the
Mia.
feds. Calm down.
It's the feds.
I'm here with one of them, an agent named
It is me. Holy shit.
Todd. Meet me at my house.
Why are you
The
chasing
feds
me,
were
pendejo?
chasing me, I said to myself. What the living fuck were they thinking?
That's
I could have
funny.
been killed. I made it to the house in a few minutes, got out of my truck,
You should have just called her, bro. You know what I'm saying? What y'all chasing her for?
got out of my truck, and started screaming at the handful of agents who were standing there. What the fuck is your problem? How could you do this to me and my son? We both could have been killed. I could have flipped my truck. We're here hiding, and you're going to come and expose my family like this? People here have no idea who I really am, but when they see a bunch of DEA agents, you can imagine what they're going to think. I'm fucked. Please, calm down,
Relax.
one agent said. My name is Todd, and I just need to ask you some questions.
Eat your Todd.
I was still livid. My husband is the one cooperating, so I have no idea what you want with me. I'm not talking to you unless I speak with a lawyer first. I pulled out my phone and called Junior's new attorney, David. He didn't answer, so I called Joe, and again, got no answer. Later on, I found out that both attorneys were at Peter and Junior's prisons meeting with them while the feds decided to ambush us. When I finally heard back from David, he explained the discussions the feds, Junior, and Peter had had separately. They'd come to an agreement that Mia and I would have full immunity from prosecution if we met with the U.S. attorneys and told them everything we knew. So you mean Junior knew about the feds coming and didn't call me? I asked. No, he explained. He had no idea they'd be coming after you. That's how great communication was. It was time for me to speak to the feds, yet I'd gotten no notice, apparently, and the only way to tell me was to chase me off the road.
Facts.
Mia. The feds hadn't done a great job of tracking me down either. First, they'd gone to my house in Kansas and discovered I wasn't there. Then, thinking I might be visiting Chicago, they'd traveled to my parents' place. Realizing I wasn't there, they called Joe. He'd been meeting with Peter, so he called me. I'm about to hop on a flight back to Chicago, he said. Meet me at the airport immediately. Okay, I'll be right there, I said, and then got in my car. You're going to get called into a meeting with the feds, he said when I got to him. You've got immunity from prosecution, but they want you to talk. You're going to have to surrender some of your possessions. Right then, I handed him the keys to my brand new Bentley.
Dang.
Take them, I said. I know I'm going to have to give up the car, so just take it now. He took the keys, and I left the car in the parking lot. I looked calm, but I was so upset. I kept thinking, I just surrendered my car, and I'm going to have to meet with the feds any day now. Yet no one really prepared me for this. Why is this happening after everything our husbands have done?
Olivia. At the end of 2010, Adrian, Mia, and I flew to Chicago. On separate days, each of us went to the U.S. Attorney's office. When I walked in, there was a whole panel of DEA agents, Tom, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Mike Ferreira. I looked at them sitting there, and fear shot through me. All I could think was, oh my God, I know I've got immunity, but what if I say something wrong? Then I realized what I had to do. Just tell them the truth, like my husband and Peter had, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, for the almost 6 months they'd been at MCC Chicago. What happened the day your husbands turned themselves in? One of the feds asked me after I sat down and got situated. I looked at him with my eyes wide open. No one had ever asked me that, not even my husband. Adrian, Mia, and I hadn't even talked about it. That whole traumatizing day had just laid there like a lump in my stomach since it happened. I sat for 5 seconds, thought about it, and immediately burst into tears. I couldn't even talk. I felt so embarrassed. I just hadn't seen that question coming. When I finally pulled myself together, I went through everything, how and when we'd gotten the call from the DEA, saying that it was time for Peter and Junior to turn themselves in. How our husbands had had 2 hours to get to the Guadalajara airport. How I'd run around like a crazy woman, taking down photos and video cameras. How we'd gotten a flat tire at the border. We talked all day, and the feds peppered me with questions. Going through all the details of the last 2 years felt terrible, like I was living through every painful moment all over again.
I wonder why they cared now. They didn't give a shit when she had to run on her own with the family and take off. They didn't care. Why they want to know now?
The agents listened carefully, never interrupting me, and when we finally finished up, they only had one thing to say. We want to know about the money you have.
Mia.
Give me the money. Where's the money? We're back to the money. Back about them dollars. Let us know everything all the way up to the point of the money.
The government wanted to know exactly where we got the money we'd been living on for 2 years. So Olivia and I sat with the feds and proffered. Then we had to account for every penny, showing exactly what we spent it on.
Olivia. Once the feds knew how much money we had, they ordered us to give it up. Mia and I flew to Chicago and bought a few Tupperware bins. You know, the kind you put your winter clothes in, then stack up in the basement, and drove to my house in the suburbs. We pulled out each and every stack of bills we had stashed in my theater room and piled them into the Tupperware, probably 10 or 12 bins. We carried them to my big Audi Q7 truck, put the back seats down, and loaded all the bins into it. They were stacked to the roof, so high you couldn't even see out the windows. As I started driving, I was so nervous. I thought to myself, if we get pulled over and the cops catch us with Tupperware containers full of money, they're going to confiscate it before we even get a chance to hand it over to the feds.
Facts.
Then we called Junior's lawyer.
I know people that dirty shit has happened to. What is it, that forfeiture? That's some dirty shit. They're just stealing.
David. Come meet us at my car, I said. We'll be at your office parking garage in half an hour. David had no idea what to expect, so he greeted us in the garage with a big smile on his face. Then he stepped back, saw the clear Tupperware in the back, and practically jumped out of his skin. What the hell am I supposed to do with all of those? David, I said, the government wants this money, and we can't live with it. Please, take it. What am I going to do?
They Davy Kleinfeld him. They brought him into the game.
Leave this in my office? I'm not going to be responsible for this. I'm sorry I put you in this position, I said, but you're a smart guy, and I need you to figure it out. He made a phone call to the feds, then said, let's get back in the car. We drove to the bank on the corner, right near his office, and together, we deposited the cash into Junior's account. It would stay there till sentencing, when he and Peter would forfeit it. You should have seen the looks on the tellers' faces when we dragged those bins in. It looked like a scene from the movies.
Yeah, but it was just the other way around. Usually that scene comes on the come up. This was on the breakdown that y'all had to turn that bread in. Damn.
Except for that one moment, the whole episode was frustrating, but pretty soon, I came to understand that the feds had just been doing their jobs. They had to do a thorough investigation, and they had to follow procedure. Even though my husband and brother-in-law might have been the most important cooperators in U.S. history, that didn't mean they or we got free passes or any type of special privileges.
Mia.
Chucky Chingon said, bury that bread, pull out minimum. Right. Live a very quiet, small income lifestyle and dig up that bread. Don't let it rot.
Almost immediately, Olivia and I actually felt great. We wanted to start a new life and have a clean slate, and that meant getting rid of everything. We needed to clear out all that dirty money and fancy stuff that had come from a criminal past. A part of us had been living in La La Land with me driving around in a Bentley like it was just the way life was. It was time to fall off the cloud nine we'd been on in Mexico and accept reality.
You can't not stand out in a Bentley. It's my shit. Like, you're gonna stand out. And yeah, it's cool. You want to feel cool. It's gonna be nice. But everybody's looking. Cartel Wives, Chapter 30.
Arrests. Olivia. When Junior and Peter began cooperating, they started a chain reaction of indictments against the entire North American drug trafficking network. Early on, the dozens of players hauled in through raids on their stash houses and warehouses were low-level workers, mainly dealers and wholesalers. But by the end of 2009, the domino effect was in full force, and U.S. attorneys were reeling in bigger and bigger fish across the country.
Mia. The indictments weighed on Peter and Junior. And the whole time they were proffering, they tried to convince some of their associates and workers to turn themselves in. Peter told me that while the prosecutor and DEA agents were sitting right next to him listening in, he would practically beg his associates to cooperate. He'd say, "You're about to get caught, but you can save yourself. We can help you." He didn't want them to go to jail because he genuinely cared about them and their families, and he knew they might face life sentences. But many refused. They were arrested and charged to the full extent of the law. Unfortunately, that wasn't the worst that happened to many of them.
All right, how y'all feel about that? Throughout the time that they were setting people up and putting people on papers, putting their workers on papers, according to this, they were begging their friends to testify. It's over. It's going down. We're testifying. Now's your chance to look out for you. Most people don't probably get that, right? You get the call from the buddy that's bringing down the whole operation, telling you, listen, jump ship, bro. Jump ship and do it now. You're not hurting me. You're hurting you by not doing it. But again, who are they testifying on? Some people are going to call them dummies. Some people are going to call them stand up. And that's just the reality of life, that there's different people. And again, we pick and choose. Some people say that half of them wish that they had done it. But how many times do you get the opportunity to hear the dude, ratting you out, telling you got a shot. Take this shot. There's people out there that use the name of the dead and say they put crimes on the dead. And some people are against that. It's subjective. Everybody's going to look at it a different way. At the end of the day, this is just somebody that turned state's evidence, trying to get somebody else to turn state's evidence. Could it have helped them? Yeah. They were going to probably, the ones that were going to talk, probably were going to talk anyway. And the ones that weren't, probably weren't going to talk anyway. The ones that didn't probably weren't going to talk anyway. Everybody made their decision. It is what it is.
Unfortunately, that wasn't the worst that happened to many of them. In December 2010, Kylie Murray, a close friend and associate of Peter and Junior's, was shot to death while he was out on bond. Kylie had always lived large. He had a 6-bedroom, 6-bath mini-mansion about 150 miles west of Chicago, and his neighbors assumed he was a former NFL player when he moved in. In reality, he was helping Peter and Junior traffic drugs throughout Chicago, and he was eventually charged with conspiring to distribute cocaine and heroin. In this business, people will murder you out of fear you might snitch, and we assumed that was the case with Kylie. I was the one who told Peter, and he took it so badly. "Remember the first time you met him?" he asked me. "Yeah, he was such a good friend to you and your brother. He lived like a celebrity. They didn't call him Hollywood for nothing." I was planning to ask his forgiveness next time I saw him. I wanted to say I was sorry and tell him I loved him. Now I'll never have that chance. The whole time my husband was waiting for his plea agreement, from 2009 on, it was just like that, one arrest right after the other. Someone would be caught, and it would lie heavy in his heart. I'd be there to pick him up, but I knew he'd never fully shake off his guilt.
You gotta own that. You gotta keep that pain. That's yours. Chucky Chigon said that's the Cali dude who they said worked with BMF. Yes. His name popped up many a time. Also popped up in the time that they was moving that money around, that DC money, with the whole Jerome Finnegan situation.
Olivia, but at the end of the day, their cooperation gave us protection. Just look at what happened with Sergio Gomez.
Mia. If you can believe it, Sergio was still out to get us. Peter and Junior had a longtime courier named Gordo, who was like a brother to them. In the period of time my husband and brother-in-law were trying to convince him to turn himself in, Gordo heard through a friend that Sergio was looking for Olivia because he wanted to kidnap her. Because Gordo had always
That Sal does not quit, bro. Buddy does not quit.
been close to our family, he didn't want anything to happen to her, so he decided to cooperate and told the feds about Sergio's plot.
Sergio's
Olivia.
wild. Saul bum ass.
Officials couldn't arrest Sergio right away, though. In order to do so, they had to set him up. Peter and Junior came up with a plan.
Mia. The idea was for Gordo to start bad-mouthing Peter and Junior, then tell Sergio that he knew where my husband and brother-in-law had stashed 600 kilos. He knew that Sergio wouldn't be able to resist getting his hands on it,
Thirsty.
so he tried to convince the DEA that this was the perfect way to nab Sergio. It took a long time, but the feds finally went for it, and Gordo was willing to help out. Sure enough, on April 9th, 2009, Sergio took the bait. The DEA filled up a blue cargo van with bricks of fake cocaine, parked it in front of a suburban Chicago warehouse, and had Gordo call Sergio's associate and tell him the address. "The key is in a Doritos bag inside a green garbage can," he said. 5 of Sergio's guys showed up to rob the van, geared up in bulletproof vests, ski masks, and guns. They were busted by the feds, and all of them were sentenced to life, except for Sergio.
Olivia. I can't tell you how happy I was that Sergio got arrested. I don't wish prison on anyone, but I hated that guy. He was nothing but a thief who tortured and killed people for a living.
They pulled a whole Federale revenge sting operation, boy.
And everything about him just made me sick. But in the scheme of things, and I mean the whole North American drug trade, Sergio was nothing. Junior and Peter had their eyes on the prize, and they'd always imagined the government would go for people like Chapo and Mayo and the BLO immediately. Not seeing them do that was frustrating.
Mia. After all, every other federal organization in Mexico seemed to be hard at work trying to dismantle the cartels. They'd even killed one of the big guns.
Olivia. On December 11th, 2009, the Mexican Navy's elite special forces raided a Christmas party being thrown by Arturo Beltran Leiva, and in an exchange of gunfire, 4 people were killed and Arturo fled. 5 days later, On December 16th, 200 Mexican Marines located him in a small town an hour north of Mexico City, raided his safe house, and in a 90-minute gun battle, killed him and 5 of his associates.
That's a long gunfight.
One Marine also died.
Mia. Then one of the good guys decided to decorate Beltran's bullet-ridden body with dollar bills, like some sick joke out of a gangster film.
One of the good guys, huh? Just thirsty for blood.
And photos flooded the internet. In retaliation, BLO members stormed a candlelight vigil for the dead Marine and killed his mother, aunt, brother, and sister.
Wow.
Olivia. Nothing so dramatic, so critical in stopping the drug trade had happened between Mexico and America, though. Chapo, Mayo, Vicente, and all the other suppliers were still at large, and the United States just seemed to be focusing on the little people in their conspiracy. The U.S.-based distributors and dealers like Sergio. Junior and Peter thought the DEA wasn't prepared for just how many players they'd arrest, and it drove them nuts. "They're going backward," Junior would say. "We're giving them the biggest people in the world, the most wanted, and they're starting at the bottom of the ladder."
I'd like to find a list of that ladder, a list of all of the people that were indicted and went, and what time, how much time they did, and who's still in, who's still out.
Then the feds got Vicente, and we all realized they actually were using the information our husbands were giving them.
Mia. Vicente was arrested in Mexico City on March 19, 2009, and charged with trafficking over $1 billion worth of cocaine and heroin. Peter and Junior signed his extradition papers, and the most significant cartel member the United States had ever captured was transported to Chicago in February 2010.
Olivia. Vicente had never been your average drug lord. While most narco juniors drive around in Lambos, Ferraris, and Maseratis and dress themselves in designer clothes, red bottoms, and iced-out jewelry, Vicente seemed humble. He wasn't looking for everyone to cater to him. Instead, he was serious about his business, and that's why he'd become number 3 in the Sinaloa cartel. Junior got along with Vicente and talked to him pretty regularly. Vicente was charming and sophisticated almost all the time, but on occasion, he displayed these really strange quirks. One of them was that he liked to blow shit up. Once, Junior went to visit Chapo in the mountains. Vicente was there, surrounded by a crowd of guys in military gear. It wasn't any big thing for cartel bosses to have militia with them, but Vicente liked to be around men with hand grenades and AK-47s just a little bit more than most people. This time was no different. Vicente turned to Junior and said, "Hey, look at that truck over there." He pointed toward a brand-new pickup truck with dealer plates and shiny leather seats. "That's a nice truck," said Junior. "It is," answered Vicente, "but watch this." Vicente motioned for one of his guys, who then walked over with a rocket launcher in his hand. "Ready, aim, fire!" Vicente yelled. Then Junior heard a huge boom and jumped back as the truck burst into flames. I guess blowing shit up was just Vicente's thing.
Mia. Vicente was one of the last cartel members Junior caught on tape, so we figured that was why the feds jumped on his case faster than everyone else's. Maybe the trail of evidence was shorter, or possibly it was because Vicente was already feeding the U.S. government information about rival cartels.
Who knows?
Snitching like...
How many of those guys that these guys put on these papers didn't have their own operation that they were running on the other end that they didn't know about? You know what I'm saying? Who knows?
That wouldn't have been unusual, in fact. It's believed that the Sinaloa cartel became so powerful because they would rather rat out other cartels' members in an attempt to dismantle their organizations.
It's crazy.
Olivia. Because of Vicente's position and all that our husbands had on him, Junior and Peter were going to have to testify against him. Well, before the trial date, Vicente hired a dream team of lawyers from New York City, who argued that the U.S. government promised Vicente immunity in exchange for intel while he was in Mexico. In their minds, and his too, he had carte blanche as long as he was feeding the government info.
Mia. As Vicente's trial approached in 2012, Junior and Peter's faces were plastered all over TV because they were the biggest witnesses against him, and his was one of the biggest drug cases ever to happen in a U.S. court of law. Unfortunately, the proceedings kept getting delayed again and again. Worried about the upcoming trial and the threats we'd been receiving, 8 DEA agents drove up to my house in blacked-out minivans, Chevy Tahoes, and a working van so that they could sweep my home for bugs and tracking devices.
Jeez.
They asked me to wait in the kitchen with my babies as they brought out these huge pieces of surveillance equipment that looked like something out of the movies. While they were sniffing around, I peeked out the window and saw 2 agents lying on plastic under my car, holding flashlights to search the undercarriage. When they were finished, they came inside and spoke to me. "You should look under your car once a week," they said. They hadn't found anything, but that didn't mean I never would. Unfortunately, Olivia had suffered something worse, and her whole life was about to be turned upside down.
What happened?
Olivia. Sergio Gomez was an orderly at the Chicago MCC while Vicente was being held there, awaiting trial. Sergio was allowed to move around freely, doing odd jobs around the center, and he befriended Vicente and gained his trust. At the time,
Bro, this Saul fool is still causing disruption from the joint? Damn, boy. Listen, when they say after the nuclear explosion, all that'll be left is the cockroaches, it'll be the cockroaches and dude just plotting wherever he could plot in a little corner somewhere in a puddle.
my first husband, Leo, was imprisoned there too. Sergio knew I'd been married to Leo, so he cozied up to him, trying to get information from him about where my parents lived.
This guy.
He knew that Vicente wanted to kill Peter and Junior, so Sergio's brilliant plan was to sell this information to Vicente. He even went so far as to transfer $6,600 into Sergio's lawyer's account for it. Even though Leo snitched on me and sent me away to prison, I'm sure the last thing he wanted was to see the cartels kill me or my parents. So he told the feds everything. I'm pretty sure he benefited, but I was still appreciative. As a result, prosecutors ripped up Sergio's plea agreement for tampering with a federal witness. Sergio's now serving 40 years.
That's where the crying came from, remember? Remember when he was crying? That's why he was crying. A last-ditch attempt to get at Val. A last-ditch attempt to do his dirtiest. Straight menace. This dude is Ronnie from Kanan, mixed with dude from BMF. I forget his name. Mixed with the white dude with the little hand from Scary Movie. You know what I'm saying? You put those together, you get Saul and shit.
Prosecutors ripped up Sergio's plea agreement for tampering with a federal witness.
Popped.
Sergio's now serving 40 years.
Wah!
Unfortunately, Sergio's getting punished once again didn't ensure a happy ending.
He's like Gargamel. His plot always falls in on his head and shit.
The feds took his threats so seriously that they relocated my parents from the home they'd lived in for 20 years. My innocent parents, who had worked so hard to give me a decent life, and who had loved me unconditionally despite all I'd put them through, had to uproot their lives and move far from everything and everyone they knew. Junior and I felt horrible. My mom and dad didn't deserve to be affected by any of this, and Junior and I will forever live with guilt for the burden we put on them.
Mia. The dangers posed didn't end there. In fact, they only got worse.
Olivia. In August 2011, I had moved to the Midwest and was beginning to settle in. I'd just unpacked all our things and was trying to make my kids and myself feel at home. One night I was looking out my window, which I do routinely, and I noticed a man sitting outside my house in a car, with a blue light shining up into his face. I realized right away he was staring at a computer. What the hell? I wondered. This can't be good. I immediately ran into the living room and unplugged my router, turned off all the lights, and laid down on the couch. Every hour or so for the rest of the night, I'd stand up in the pitch dark and walk to the window to peek out and see if the man was still there. Sure enough, all night long, he sat in his car on his computer, and all night long, I panicked, thinking, this guy is going to kick in my door any minute and kill me and my children.
That guy's sitting there recalibrating cell phone towers and shit.
The next morning, I didn't take my kids to school and refused to let them go outside to play. I crawled on my knees past my windows, crouching so I could peek out and try to get a visual of him. I started to write down his schedule, which didn't consist of much except him leaving for 15 minutes or so every now and then. I just assumed he was driving to Walmart so he could go to the bathroom. One of my neighbors called the cops, and they showed up while the guy was on one of his 15-minute pee breaks. When he returned, they questioned him, and the man drove off. Just before the police left, I walked out of my house, pretending to be a concerned citizen rather than the focus of the guy in the car, and cornered them. "Did you find out who that man is?" I asked innocently. "He's a private investigator working on a case," the officer said.
Well, he's not that fucking good at it. He's sitting right in front of her house.
"And we can't tell him to leave. He has every right to be here." I walked back inside, defeated. I wanted more than
Unless he's watching somebody's house up the block. But if he's watching her, he's wilding.
anything
Unless he wants her to know he's there.
to march up to his car, bang on his window, and tell him I knew exactly who he was working for. I wanted to get up in his face and scream, "You're working for the cartels, you fucking coward. How can you live with yourself knowing that your boss wants to kill me and my kids? I hope you rot in hell." I called the feds, and they told me they were sending agents to investigate, but I needed to get my things and leave immediately. That evening, I packed up my car in the garage, waited for the man to drive away, put my boys in their car seats, and drove to a hotel as fast as I could and never looked back. We lived there, in hell, for 6 months. The 3 of us were crammed into a tiny room with double beds. I needed space, so the hotel removed the desk and office chair, and I stacked up plastic storage bins full of all of our possessions. One had teddy bears in it, another held toys, another had books, and the rest held clothes. After we woke up in our little beds side by side, I'd opened up the mini fridge, take out a half-gallon of milk, and serve cereal. After breakfast, I'd put on Brandon's and Benjamin's backpacks, and we'd walk through the lobby, where the maids and front desk staff would wave at them and say, "Have a good day at school." I'd drive them to school, go back to the hotel, lock my door, close the blinds, and sit in the dark all day. But when it was time to pick the boys up, I always had a smile on my face. "This is so much fun! It's a mini vacation," I'd say. I don't know who I thought I was kidding. At night, Brandon would cry that he just wanted to go home, and in the dark I would lie and cry silently so that he couldn't see or hear me. My breaking point was when I came back to the hotel after his kindergarten graduation, and he threw himself on the bed in a little ball and screamed, "I just want Dad!" I wanted the exact same thing. I started questioning whether or not cooperating was the right thing to do, wondering, if this is hurting my kids and feels so wrong, how can it be right? I knew I was being selfish, but all I could think about was how much pain and suffering my family was going through. We did this for a normal life, but running for your life in the middle of the night was not normal. After 6 months, the government finally relocated me to a different state. The U.S. attorney investigated who had hired the PI, but they weren't allowed to tell me their findings. Maybe I'll never know. All I can do is be thankful that no one killed me or my kids.
Or Buddy was just investigating a cheating wife up the block or something. Who knows? So here we go. Cartel Wives, Chapter 31.
Grand jury and plea agreements. Mia. When Peter and Junior agreed to become informants and turn themselves in, they formally and legally admitted they were criminals. This acknowledgement didn't change during their years of proffering, although then they were protected. Anything they said couldn't be used against them in a court of law.
Olivia. In order to face indictments, they had to sit in front of a grand jury, which they did from December 2008 to June 2009, during their time at the Chicago MCC. Federal grand juries are typically larger than those in state courts. They can contain anywhere from 16 to 23 jurors. In front of these law-abiding citizens, Junior and Peter were prepared to be 100% truthful, incriminate themselves, and tell on everyone they cared for. They knew they were going to be charged, but for what was still in question. That would depend on the grand jury testimony and the government's thorough investigation to make sure all that they'd said was true.
Mia. Peter and Junior had to go in front of a grand jury maybe a dozen times, and it was one of the hardest things they'd endured in the whole course of their cooperation. Standing before the grand jury, they had to read out every criminal act they'd committed while they ran their organization. Every single terrible thing. It made Peter feel awful. He didn't even want me to read his sworn statements, let alone his kids one day in the future.
Think about that. They putting all their dirt on the paper, you know what I'm saying? And evidently there's no bodies in there and they still feeling some kind of guilt for the things that they did. Yeah, that's a gut-wrenching situation. Your friends, your enemies, your associates, everybody balled up in one situation, and shit, everybody headed to hell.
I'm so ashamed, he told me on one Sunday visit. When I turned myself in, I wasn't proud of what I'd done. But at the time, I thought I should be forgiven. Now, I'm not sure anyone
Jonathan
should ever
Pantia
forgive
sent
me.
$2 salutes Chi-Il, my brother, Il Cartel members, and chat.
Olivia.
I hope you are having a blessed and grateful Bartel
Junior was
Wives
so
Saturday.
nervous
Like
before
and
his first
subscribe
grand
to the great
jury
quality
appearance,
content. It's free.
but he wasn't the
Shout out
only
to the
person
Bears
on
and my
edge.
Higa Velas Niners
The
game
whole
cup.
thing was such a big deal that before he and Peter walked in, officials cleared the entire court. Even the parking lot was empty. When they entered, Tom was sweating profusely. Apparently, it was a big day for everyone, even the U.S. attorney.
Mia. The moment Peter stood in front of the grand jury and stated his name, all those people staring at him in disbelief made him feel humiliated. In the drug world, he felt normal, even respected. Out there, in the open, in a court of law,
Ugh.
he felt so vulnerable.
Yeah, you're smut to those people. You know what I'm saying? They look at regular people like they're smut. So I could only imagine what they're looking at a notorious kingpin like.
Like such a criminal that it was hard for him to think straight.
Olivia. Tom broke down their whole case, walking the jury through everything, from the very first day they started, when they sold their first 30 kilos, to their peak, when they had a $200 billion empire. Then, he let the grand jury ask Junior and Peter questions. Pretty soon, the talk turned personal. Everyone was so intrigued with them.
Mia. At one point, someone on the grand jury stopped in the middle of his inquiry, stared at them, and said, "Are you guys going to write a book or make a movie?"
Bruh, the story tells itself. Stranger than fiction. You don't even have to embellish for this shit to be dope. And everybody that seems to hear the story knows it. The person that just asked him that knows it. I know it. Y'all are always telling me in the chat, man, this should be a movie, this should be that. It's just obvious, man. It just makes sense.
Olivia. Finally, in August 2009, the grand jury considered the testimony, read all the evidence, and handed over the indictments. When Mia and I first read them, we were overwhelmed. "This is a lot to take in," I said to Mia. "Yeah," she answered. "Reading everything Junior and Peter did on paper is different than living it every day."
Mia. Those indictments were hard pills to swallow. Junior and Peter had always wanted to protect us, so in a lot of ways we'd been shielded from the whole truth of what they did. They never wanted us to worry, so in Mexico they made our lives feel almost normal. Still, we didn't feel lied to.
I wonder if I can if there's a way to access those grand jury testimonies. Because I'd like to hear what the internal struggle is about. I mean, they know, the women know they're hustlers. The women know they've been hustling. Is it the scale? Is it, you know what I'm saying? Especially when there's no bodies, they ain't torture nobody. Their job was basically to outsmart everybody trying to stop them. Ian in the chat said it should definitely be a movie. It will definitely be a movie, and not very far from now, a TV show. I mean, Charlie's talked about it a little bit. Let the cat out the bag. Val talked about it a little bit. Let a little bit of the cat out the bag. So I'm confident this thing's going to be a full-blown, TV show success.
And we certainly weren't mad at them. Sure, we were disturbed to see everything in print, but we knew that Peter and Junior changing their lives had all been done for us and our children. They'd become the men they promised us they'd be, and that we always knew they were.
Olivia. After the indictments were handed over, the U.S. attorneys and Peter's and Junior's lawyers set to work on a plea agreement. Plea bargains are essentially contracts that are governed by layers upon layers of statutes, rules, guidelines, Department of Justice policies, and case law. In their plea agreements, Junior and Peter would accept all that they'd been charged with. They'd take responsibility for the distribution, the manufacturing, the trafficking, you name it. Then, they'd agree to a range of years that the judge might sentence them to. And it could be 5 years or 5 times that. Sounds straightforward, right? It was actually a living hell. It was this complicated, painful process that began June 2012, 4 long years after they left Mexico, and took 2 months.
Bruh, so that means you go through you make the decision, you call in, you say, hey, I want to give y'all what I got. They say, all right, you're on your own. You got a 9-month situation where you're out there on your own, doing it on your own. You finally get snatched up. You come to the other side of the border. They straight put you to work right away. And it's 4 years later, you still rolling shit up. You still rolling people up. You're still giving grand jury testimony, and they still ain't gave you a date. They say, 5 to 700 years. Whatever we decide when we decide it.
Mia. Over that whole summer, people were angry. And I don't just mean at each other. They were angry at us. The U.S. attorneys went back and forth with our lawyers. Then our lawyers went back and forth.
And not just the U.S. attorneys and the lawyers and the streets is mad. There's people out there mad, families out there mad, kids out there mad. Then you got the knuckleheads that, like run into Val in a Burger King. He's like, oh, are you snitching on me? Are you snitching on me? They convince him that they're not. 2 seconds later, Buddy's like, all right, can I get some work? Like, bro, you looking to go to jail.
With Peter and Junior. Both sides were eager to settle, and because of that, our lawyers pressured Junior and Peter. Do you know how many kilos of cocaine you sent into the United States? One of them once asked. Yes, why? Peter asked. Because it was so much that most people would get life in prison. You need to sign this plea agreement. Stop fucking playing games.
Most people ain't going to give you what Buddy's going to give you. Most people are going to roll up 3 or 4 dudes off the block. These guys gave you the supply chain, top to bottom.
Peter was pissed. "Why are you scolding us? You're our lawyers. You're supposed to be on our side." Peter and Junior loved their lawyers, and so did we. They'd slaved away for them. Joe especially had been on their side since way before they were on the international stage. Junior and Peter never lost sight of that. But everyone in a situation like theirs wants the best deal. Of course they were going to fight.
Olivia. I was making calls to David and Joe and his legal team day in and day out, and after weeks of endless conversations, they began to get really frustrated with me. We weren't seeing eye to eye. They were advising us, pleading with Peter and Junior to sign, and we were giving them every reason why they shouldn't. It became a non-stop screaming match. Things got so bad that our lawyers grew tired of explaining themselves to me. I stopped getting straight responses, and sometimes I'd just get a one-word answer, which is almost as bad as no answer at all.
Mia. I'd have to pass messages from our lawyers to Peter, then relay his questions back to them, because in prison, you don't get special privileges to call your lawyer whenever you want. It has to be a matter of life and death. All this back and forth every day felt endless. There were so many calls, I started to get dizzy every time the phone rang.
Olivia. Our lawyers wanted Peter and Junior to sign a plea agreement for 10 to 16 years, but I couldn't comprehend why they should settle for that. I thought they didn't deserve a day more than 10 years after everything they'd done. They'd jeopardized their lives when they worked undercover in Mexico. They'd given the government every major player in the cartels on a silver platter.
Bruh.
On top of that,
They was straight up undercover. They was undercover police, bro. There was nothing more you could ask from them than you would ask from somebody on a payroll that could never get that close. Crazy.
they'd voluntarily turned themselves in to serve their time and pay for their crimes. Theirs was the biggest case that had ever touched the Chicago office. Bigger than Al fucking Capone.
Alphonse.
Plus, their intentions had always been good. Light years more honest than anyone else in the drug trade. I tried to spell this out to our lawyers. In this business, many men use their money and power to hurt and kill people, I said. Our husbands have been robbed, kidnapped, and almost left for dead. And not once have they gone out for revenge or been violent. Doesn't that count for something? Apparently, it didn't.
You could have bodied everybody and they'd have still treated you the same way. Crazy.
I knew there were hitmen for the mob, with bodies stacked up and hidden away,
Facts.
who had been offered better deals for cooperating.
Facts.
These guys were in and out of jail in less than 10 years. I guess that shit only happens in New York City, I thought.
Gotta have Cutler as your lawyer.
Mia. When things didn't go our way, we assumed the worst. That the government didn't need our husbands as much anymore since Vicente was now cooperating. Whatever was going through their minds, the U.S. attorneys were playing hardball, not budging 1 inch. They were offering Junior and Peter 10 to 16 years, and that was just what it was going to be. After 2 months, Peter finally decided to sign his plea agreement. He did so the day before Junior did, and then he appeared in front of the federal judge.
Olivia. Unlike civil and criminal cases in state and county courts, federal courts don't use juries to approve plea agreements and determine sentences. Instead, there's one appointed official who reviews them and later decides how many days, weeks, or years a defendant gets. In Junior and Peter's case, the judge who was going to decide their fate was the Chief Judge for the United States Court of the Northern District of Illinois, Ruben Castillo.
Ruben.
Mia. Like Peter and Junior, Judge Castillo had done better than his parents. He'd been born in Chicago to a Puerto Rican mom and a Mexican dad, and was the first member of his family to go to college. When he was appointed by Bill Clinton to the U.S. District Court in 1994, he was the first Latino federal judge in the state of Illinois. Castillo had grown up in a tough neighborhood, and many of his friends ended up in prison.
All right, to all my Latinos in the chat, did any of that shit matter? You think he gave them any leniency or gave them any, gave them something fair, considering what they went through? I don't think it helps at all. Ruben Castillo probably look at them even worse than, what some other judge would.
Olivia. In a lot of ways, he and our husbands were two sides of the same coin. But while one had gone to law school and risen to the highest ranks of his profession, the others had run the most lucrative drug operation in the United States. We all knew that growing up in a bad neighborhood is very different than being raised in a home where you're trained to sell drugs. But still, we all wondered, is what makes them similar and different going to make him sympathetic or repel him?
Mia. When Peter walked into the courtroom, Judge Castillo was sitting in his oversized chair, front and center, way up high, looking like he was playing God. The courtroom is built to make you feel intimidated, but Peter was experiencing that and more. I was humiliated, Peter said, but I was ready to apologize. I couldn't believe the destruction I'd caused in my life and the lives of others. I wasn't there, but Peter told me that while Judge Castillo read out his charges, he'd never felt sorrier about anything. He wanted to denounce his whole life right then and there. Still, I wished I could tell the judge one good thing about myself, he told me. But he knew he was fooling himself. The time for defending himself was over. He had to be man enough to stand in front of a judge, feel intense remorse, and accept his fate.
Olivia. Junior couldn't imagine being alone, in jail, for 16 years. Our babies and Samantha and Sasha were growing up without him, and the 6-year difference he was fighting for determined whether he'd be home before Brandon graduated from high school.
Yeah, that's 6 years.
He might even miss his girls' college graduations. Junior and I love each other enough to get through anything, but it's our kids we worry the most about, and we knew that a few years makes a huge difference in a young child's life. So when our lawyer, David, called me one evening and pleaded with me not to let Junior make the biggest mistake of his life, I didn't know what to think. Do I fight like I always have, or do we just accept it? If there's anything I've learned in my marriage, it's to trust my husband 100%. And so I decided to agree with Junior, whatever he wanted to do. Junior fought to the very last day, right up until the minute the U.S. Marshals flew him to Chicago. When he landed, Tom and David were there to greet him. "Peter already signed the papers, Junior," David said. The U.S. attorney added, "And if you don't sign them too, it's possible the judge will rip up the plea agreement, and you'll be looking at life."
Everything is leverage with them guys, boy. Everything is leverage. Shout out 030 North in the chat, said Latino judges are the worst. Yeah, man. It send you away for a long, long time.
Junior was shocked and hurt, and he knew he was backed up against the wall. He and his twin brother had always been on the same page, but Peter had gone ahead and signed the papers without telling him.
Oh, that's a point of contention right there. I don't know if that was revealed in Surviving the Chapo. I don't think I remember that. I might be mistaken. It's been a long time since season 1, but wow.
Why the hell did my brother do that? He thought to himself. Now I don't have 2 legs to stand on. Deep down, he realized what had really happened. Peter hadn't done anything wrong, and he'd never meant to catch Junior short. It had just been too hard trying to negotiate through their attorneys. For the first real time in their lives, at such a critical moment, they hadn't been able to communicate. They hadn't been able to read each other's minds.
Right.
As Junior signed his plea agreement, minutes before going in front of the judge, Tears fell from his eyes. In a room full of men, all of whom were staring at him at his most vulnerable moment, he felt degraded. Worse, he worried that he was giving up, that he was letting me down. Then, as he stood before Judge Castillo, who was draped in a big, black cloak with the United States of America emblem behind him and the stars and stripes beside him, Junior felt the power of the court. When Judge Castillo read him his charges, he fully understood the severity of his crimes and the harm he'd done to society, and he realized, I'm ashamed of the damage that I've caused, and I'm ready to pay for my crimes. It's the right thing to do. Judge Castillo pulled his glasses down, looked my husband in the eye, almost surprised, and said, Mr. Flores, do you understand everything that you're admitting to? Yes, Your Honor, he answered, struggling to get the words out. Accepting responsibility was hard, and listening to all he'd done was painful. Suddenly, he knew he'd done the right thing, and later, he told me as much. Liv, we've been living in this bubble. I can't believe everything we did. It sounded so bad. I can't believe I fought with my attorneys and almost lost my deal. I could have spent the rest of my life in prison. I'm so grateful I got the plea agreement I did.
I want to read those papers. I want to know. Nosy. I want to know.
I realize now how severe my case was. I can't believe we were living like that for so long. I'm glad it's over. We're going to get through this. I'm proud of you, I said. Then I added, how are you feeling? Relieved. He looked it. Right then and there, I knew our attorneys had been right, and I felt bad for second-guessing them and giving them such a hard time. They'd had his best interests at heart, and I'd just been so passionate, so determined to have my children grow up with their dad. We'd risk our lives after all, and our husbands were going to have years and years in prison to think about it.
We get to hear their story. We get to hear what's going on with them. There's 100 other families going through that at that same moment. Do I take this deal? Do I do this? Do I bail out? What do I do? Do I keep my mouth shut? They warned me. Do I, it's just bad all the way around, man. It's bad all the way around. But again, it seems like that game is catered to that. You go in knowing this is what it's going to be. I'm going to be the man eventually, or everything's going to be taken away from me. Somebody's going to rat on me, this, that, or the other. They're going to use it against each other, and everybody ends up where? There or in the box. As rough as it was for them, it was rough for a lot of people. I want to read those transcripts. I want to know or what they had to say in the courtroom to the grand jury, you know what I mean? And again, this platform is always open to anybody that was affected by it. Cartel Wives, Chapter 32.
Sentencing. Olivia. Sentencing was scheduled for Tuesday, January 27th, 2015, and getting to that day had taken forever. We'd waited over 2 years since Junior and Peter had signed their plea agreement.
Mia. Over all that time, the government had to make sure all testimony that Junior and Peter had given them was fact, and they had to corroborate their testimony with other witnesses. They weren't in a hurry. On a case this big, they had to do things right.
Olivia. But for 2 years, we all hung in the balance, and we were worried about so many things. One of them was the judge.
Mia. Judge Castillo had served on something called the Federal Sentencing Commission, which was a committee that outlined the levels that determined sentences for federal crimes. We were so afraid of him, because clearly, having been on that committee, he believed in the federal guidelines and he was there to enforce them.
Olivia. Federal crimes go up to level 43, weighing what your crime is with your criminal history. Given all that they'd done, Junior and Peter were off the charts. They would have been looking at life if they hadn't cooperated. But here's the thing. The judge could throw out the plea agreement and sentence them to whatever he thought was best. 99.9% of the time, the judge would go with the U.S. Attorney's recommendation. But there was still that 0.1% chance he might decide on something else entirely.
Mia. The other issue at hand concerned something called a 5K.1.1 motion, which the U.S. Attorney had recently filed. A 5K.1.1 asks the judge to consider a defendant's substantial assistance to authorities when he hands down a sentence. The U.S. Attorney had practically gushed about Peter and Junior when he wrote his recommendations, saying they voluntarily broke away from their positions in the highest echelons of the cartel world to transform themselves into extraordinary witnesses. Then he made clear that they were the biggest drug informants in U.S. history, having done more to dismantle the drug trade than anyone. He said that he and the other prosecutors hoped Judge Castillo would reduce the sentence to something at or near the...
So they sold them on these buddies was the big boys. They're offering up the most. You should have some leniency on these guys. These guys have suffered to get you this information. He's selling it to the judge. And judge sitting there, not very entertained. The judge is probably not entertained, but that's just my guess. I don't know. The judge might have been nice and had his hands tied. We about to see right now. The judge smash him because
the low end of the 10 to 16 years outlined in the plea agreements. In the weeks leading up to sentencing, I was really counting on the 5K.1.1 motion the U.S. Attorney had filed. I mean, I wasn't ignoring the fact that everything was ultimately up to the judge, but Peter and I thought things might swing in their favor. Besides, I thought, if they don't deserve the 10 years, then who does? They were fully committed to cooperation from start to finish, and without a doubt never lost sight of the reason why they did this in the first place. They'd risked their lives and the lives of the people they loved the most. They set the bar high when it came to cooperation, and were a great example of people who truly wanted to change. Not just that, but their case was the biggest drug conspiracy case in U.S. history.
Listen, man, I don't know if I'm buying the you felt like you wanted to change angle. That comes after the fact. To me, the only factor in my mind, I get change and I get people going through that, but the question is, would you have wanted to change if the shit wasn't hitting the fan and there wasn't a split in the cartel and both sides was either wanted to keep you while the other side wanted to eat you? You know what I'm saying? Would you have wanted to change if everything was just fine and moving forward nice and quietly? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. To me, the only incentive I feel like I would have in that moment is, listen, my family's in danger. That's the only thing that would make me think of doing what they did. Again, aside from the fact that it's something that people do in their game, like back and forth. The first thing is the family. And I feel like the judge is going to look like that. Like, man, did they want to change? If this wouldn't have gone bad, did they want to change? Or is the judge less informed and really not that into it anyway and not deep into the story and probably doesn't care and he's just out there arbitrarily just making decisions? But I would have looked at them and said, like, nah, you was worried about your life. Don't talk to me about change right now.
Olivia. After Junior and Peter risked their lives in Mexico, and after everyone they'd helped bring in, I still believed passionately that they shouldn't do a day more than 10 years. Junior's lawyer had been reluctant to agree with me because he didn't want to piss off Judge Castillo. So before sentencing, I hired a new lawyer from New York to come in with a fresh set of eyes. I thought Jim, the new attorney, might push for 10.
Uh-oh. She went and got a second opinion. I don't know if that's gonna stir up some controversy in the back room, let alone the courtroom.
But instead, he did the opposite.
Oh.
I think you should accept the fact that they might get 16, he said. It's as simple as that. It wasn't what I wanted to hear, so even though it hurt, it was the reality of things. Suddenly, I saw the big picture, and by the time sentencing day rolled around, I was prepared for the worst and hoping for the best.
Mia. I couldn't believe it when sentencing day finally arrived. This was it. Everything we'd done and gone through together was going to come to an end in just a few hours. Everything depended on one man who had my future and the future of my children in his hands. His decision was going to determine my happiness. Peter was trusting someone else, too. Just before sentencing, he said, "I'm leaving it up to God to decide our fates. It's all up to him."
Olivia.
Here's the problem. The problem is that Judge Ruben Castillo thinks that he's God in that moment. You know what I mean? That's the problem.
That day I had such mixed emotions. I was so eager to know Junior's future, but I was terrified about the outcome. I lay on my bed, staring up at the ceiling, feeling paralyzed. Deep down, though, I kept thinking, Junior and I love each other so much that we can withstand anything. Our relationship is rock solid, so whatever the judge decides won't break us. But most of all, it was our children I was stressed about.
Mia. It snowed a lot on January.
I wonder if their children kind of like journal their feelings now, how they feel about their life and how they felt about their life and the things that they've gone through because of the lives that their parents chose. Because, you know, from a kid to an adult, man, things feel different, seem different. You forget things. You paint things differently in your mind as you get older. I wonder if they archive their thoughts now and journal their thoughts now, because down the line, you could expect 20 years from now a book coming from some of these kids, you know, talking about their experience. I wouldn't doubt it.
January 27th. So Bella and Blake were home from school. I hadn't said a thing to them about what was happening, but I think they knew something was up. They'd been following me around the house all day, almost obsessively. I'd been giving them tons of hugs and kisses, but it hadn't helped. Eventually, I basically barricaded myself in my room to clear my head and pray when I heard a knock on the door. "Mommy, can we play Chutes and Ladders with you?" asked Bella. "Sure, baby, sure," I answered, relieved someone was taking sentencing off my mind. "Whatever you need."
Olivia. We all felt so vulnerable because of our kids. Brenton and Benjamin had been babies when Junior turned himself in, doing the right thing so our children would have a better future. But here was the irony. They were growing up without seeing their father every day. In doing the right thing, we'd ended up hurting them. It got worse before sentencing, too. I was so stressed that I'd had trouble even focusing on my boys. I wasn't present at all. I was constantly upset. Junior was always sad, and my poor babies kept asking for their daddy to come home. I knew it was taking a toll on Brandon especially. He cried when we left our visits. He cried before he went to bed, and he even cried in the shower, for God's sake. So I took him to a child psychologist. I didn't go into the extent of our situation, like what Junior had done, but I told her my husband was in prison. After a few months of sessions, she and I met separately, and she reassured me. "You and your husband are doing the best you can. You're good parents," she said. "But my boys are a wreck," I pleaded. "All they want is for their dad to come home. I'm a protector, and I feel like I've let Brandon down through all of this." She looked at me and got really serious. There are many children who don't have their fathers in their lives for different reasons.
Absolutely.
Some have dads who've died, while others have chosen not to be present. Then you have fathers who are so consumed by work and don't give their children the undivided attention they need. One day your husband will come home, but for right now your kids have 100% of their dad every single weekend. He's a great dad. He's there for them, and you're both doing the right thing. When they're grown up, that's what they're going to remember. Right then I decided, whatever Junior's sentence is going to be, it's not going to change us as a family. We've sacrificed more than most, and that's only made us closer. Still, my heart just ached for Junior to come home sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. I don't doubt it one bit, but it is what it is. Things don't always go as we desire, and we don't always get what we want. You know what I mean? So, again, there's some kids out there that grow up without fathers, grow up without mothers. Some kids grow up with them and don't, wish they didn't. So, what they were going through wasn't different than what other people were going through in that sense. You know what I mean? In every other sense, yeah, it's hard for people to relate to what they were going through, but in that sense, many people can relate.
Mia. The day of sentencing, Peter and Junior were everywhere on the news. They even started trending on Yahoo. The TV broadcasts kept flashing a photo of them when they were 16, and suddenly Peter became that teenager I met a million years ago. I started to remember being in my early 20s, so crazy about him, and how I always left a rose on my front doorstep, or how he'd call me at work just to brighten up my day. I wanted so badly to be with him, but I couldn't. Our lawyers had told us not to come, that it was far too dangerous. So on the most important day of our lives, instead of holding my husband's hand, I was home, playing Chutes and Ladders. I'd even called my lawyer that morning. I'll go to the court in a disguise. I'll wear a wig if I have to. I just need him to know he's not alone. No, he said. This is open to the public. You think people aren't going to try to find out if his wife is there?
Absolutely.
If I see you there, I'll drag you out myself.
Easy pickings. Easy pickings. Just popping up publicly to places that people know you're going to be at.
Olivia. That morning, Mia and I called each other every hour. I've heard nothing, I'd say. Have you? No, she'd answer. But the lawyer promises he'll call me.
Mia, I finally unplugged the TV just to be sure I wouldn't find out that way. I needed a real live person to talk to when their sentences were announced. Then, just before lunch, I started getting texts from my family, one after the other after the other. Are you okay? Did you hear? I'm praying for you. Oh, God, I thought. I hope it's not bad news. Then my phone rang, and it was Olivia. Her lawyer had just told her everything.
Olivia. From the minute they sat at our kitchen table in Guadalajara and decided to become informants to the day they walked into court to find out their fates, Junior and Peter had never stopped helping the government. In fact, the morning of sentencing, they'd had a meeting with the feds to discuss yet another superseding indictment out of San Diego.
Bruh, them fools in that time got promotions telling them motherfuckers, man. They had them busy, boy. Took a couple of them high-power DEA agents' jobs and shit. 030 North in the chat said, how long does Valerie have to do? The word is 3.5 for both of them. 3.5. And I don't know how that works in the feds. All I know is if that Emma Coronel chick got out and how early time she got out, those wives should most definitely be getting out before her. You know what I'm saying? In a shorter time than her. If that don't happen, it's just blatant at that point.
The extradition of Mayo's sons, Mayito Gordo and Mayito Flaco. They signed those papers, followed by papers for Puerca's sister, La Patrona.
Mia. Then they walked into Judge Castillo's courtroom, sporting beige prison uniforms and buzz cuts, and were greeted by the U.S. attorneys and their assigned DEA agents, who'd voluntarily flown in just to speak on their behalf. They'd flown in because they were now stationed in different parts of the country. Peter and Junior hadn't laid eyes on each other in almost 5 years, and they hugged and cried when they met. They hadn't expected to be reunited until they came home from prison.
Olivia. It was a media frenzy. But who stood out were a few Mexican women sitting in the first row, their eyes burning holes in the backs of the twins' heads. Peter and Junior assumed they were related to some of the people that they'd cooperated against, but they never turned around to find out for sure.
Mia.
Why? Why didn't they turn around? It could feel like you being arrogant in these people's face doing that. Turn around, taking a look at them. Or was it shame? Or was it, what could it have been? Was what it was, that's for sure.
The U.S. attorneys started by giving a full account of Peter and Junior's crimes and cooperation. From the minimum of 60 tons of cocaine they'd trafficked into Chicago over the years, to the fact that their cooperation was unparalleled in the city's history and resulted in dozens of national and international arrests and convictions. While the attorneys made a point of saying that their cooperation wasn't 100% perfect, calling particular attention to the 276 kilograms of cocaine they'd trafficked without telling the government, and the fact—
Bro, the government is a big bitch, boy. It's an ungrateful bitch. That's what she is. An ungrateful, unfaithful girlfriend, just like Success. They gave them. These fools is letting them go into debt. They're letting them raise red flags about what they're doing by not, letting them just work the way they were working and make the money so that everything looks perfect and you can get what you want. But they want to hold 270 grand that they had to get behind their back because these fools is just hanging them out there to dry. Like, government is a big hoe. Take. And then like, oh, one time they went and they did a deal without us. Well, every other deal I've done, I've exposed myself to the people that you're supposed to be protecting me from. But you're not helping me. So, at the end of the day, it's fuck you to the government. And they're absolutely giving you a fuck you themselves. They don't care. They're not worried about it.
calling particular attention to the 276 kilograms of cocaine.
Okay, I'm sorry. It wasn't 276 grams. It was 276 kilos. Dang.
They'd trafficked without telling the government, and the fact that they'd arranged for the pickup of—
I would have done 570 kilos without telling the government. The government wasn't helping me do shit.
And the fact that they'd arranged for the pickup of drug proceeds. They still showered them with praise.
Olivia, they cooperated at the height of their criminal enterprise, said U.S. Attorney Mike, who'd replaced Tom after he stepped down. These two defendants are the most valuable cooperators this district has ever seen in the context of a drug case, and as well, Your Honor, in the context of international money laundering related to drug trafficking charges. Then he gave specifics, saying, a massive criminal enterprise used to exist here in Chicago. It no longer exists, and they are directly responsible for that.
Mia.
Selling it.
He concluded by asking the judge for a sentence at or near the low end of the plea agreement, concluding 10 years would be best because their cooperation had been unprecedented, extraordinary, historic, incomprehensible.
And guess what? How many of these judges already, by the time this goes down, how many of these judges are already jaded by the fact that prosecutors have been telling them for years and years and years, this man is a notorious trafficker, the size of which we've never seen before, and all this hyperbole, right? And blowing up these little, street level guys into these monsters, right? To where they finally get the giant and nobody believes that they got a giant. It's just these two little twins here. And these judges are not impressed when they tell them, listen, these guys are the reason that the trade even exists right now. They stop, the trade slows down, this happens, that happens. They're that big. And the judge is thinking, well, y'all been telling me he was that big and he was that big and he was that big. Nobody really paying attention, man. Everybody phoning in their job.
Words hardly ever used in a federal courtroom by a U.S. attorney. A man who'd spent almost 7 years working tirelessly to prosecute Peter and Junior practically begged the judge to go easy on them.
Olivia. Next, Junior and Peter addressed Judge Castillo, each taking turns. Junior went first, followed by Peter. Choking up, they both took full responsibility for their crimes, for the damage they'd caused, and for putting their families in harm's way. I know my actions deserve the greatest punishment, said Peter, and I'm grateful that the government has asked you to consider my work as a cooperator.
Mia. Then It was Judge Castillo's turn to speak. I think growing up in Chicago under different circumstances, both of you gentlemen probably would have accomplished a great deal if you had been law-abiding.
Okay, we're starting off on a good note. Judge could see that they might, they might have done something different. They might have franchised 50 McDonald's if they had the opportunity. Her voice of him is great. It's almost like Chapo, a little bit of Chapo, a little bit of Pete in there.
Because there's a lot of things you are, but stupid is not one of them. Calling them the most significant drug dealers that I've had to sentence in 20 years on the bench, and that's saying a lot. He didn't skirt the fact that their crimes were devastating and horrific. Then Judge Castillo paused and removed his glasses, looking them in the eyes. Sounding as stern as you'd expect of a judge who'd gotten as far as he had, he pointed out that their cooperation was imperfect and cited the 276 kilograms they'd trafficked without telling the feds. He admitted that while it was terrible they'd lost their father because of their cooperation, tens of thousands of others had lost their lives because of drugs, because of their drugs.
Olivia. Then, the judge gave them 14 years and ordered them to forfeit more than $3.5 million.
Dirty.
He said he would have given them 12 years, closer to what the U.S. attorney had recommended, if they hadn't trafficked the 276 kilos.
Easy to say that shit when you're nice and safe sitting in your leather chair in your quarters with your robe on and shit, eating fucking oatmeal, you goofballs. It's easy. Them judges, I just watch them judges just pick people off in those videos all day. They just, it's one of the most arrogant positions, and people think it's a noble position. Maybe it's noble for a couple here and there, a couple judges here and there, but miss me with that shit.
The 276 kilos that had probably saved us our lives. My lawyer sent me a frickin' text message with the news. It said, 14 years. Sorry. When I called Mia right away, she lost it. When I say she lost it, I mean all you could hear was her scream and fall to the floor.
Mind you, think about it. Think about where we're at right now in their story, right? They were fighting over a 4-year discrepancy here, right? They ended up with 4, right? And she's screaming at the top of her lungs over that extra 4 years, right? Same as the crybaby killer. He cried over that extra whatever many years, right? She's wilding over whatever that many years. Look where they at now, that another 3.5 is off the table with them not together. You know what I mean? That's just bananas to even think about. Back then, they was wilding out about that 4 years, but here we are, all these years later, after they served that 12.5-year sentence, after they went through everything that they went through, now the wives are back in there for 3.5. It's a crazy fucking story, man.
Mia. I was devastated. I kept thinking to myself, this is not what we planned. This is not what we did everything for. 14 years is not what we risked our lives for.
Olivia. For one of the first times in my life, I shut my mouth and listened to Mia sobbing. I didn't say a thing. In my mind, though, I was thinking, what are you upset about? Have you not been listening to me? I'd spent the last 7 years fighting with Peter's lawyer, obsessively calling Junior's lawyer, spending money on a fancy Manhattan lawyer, and even picking lawyers up at the airport to drive them to Junior's prison. All those miles and hours and money, and they'd all told me the same thing. Junior and Peter might get 16 years. Yet Mia and Peter had acted like it was a given that they were going to get 10 years. At one point, Mia had even said, I think they'll get time served. I'd shot back, you're out of your mind. They're going to get 16 years because the attorney I hired from New York is sure of it. We really have to listen to what these attorneys are telling us. Mia, I want 10 years just as much as you do, but I'm just trying to prepare you so you don't fall apart if the worst happens.
You gotta be realistic, and that's the thing. Us as humans, we'll lie to ourselves just to feel better, and that's a defense mechanism. And if that's what Viv needed at the time, then it is what it is. You know what I'm saying?
We've been consumed by this for too long, and we've been thinking with our hearts and not with our heads. We have to be logical. She wouldn't even discuss it. No, that new lawyer is full of shit. They're going to get 10. Anytime I'd talk to Mia,
She was lying to herself, you know what I'm saying? But we do this. This is a natural thing. It's a defense mechanism, you know what I mean? We're going to tell ourselves the best outcome we could possibly have out of the whole list of worst outcomes that we could possibly have. Let's choose the best one. Let's run with that one.
I wanted to shake her. I felt like she was living in the Twilight Zone. All I could think was, what planet are you living on? What are you telling my brother-in-law? What is he telling you? But on the phone that day, I shut my trap. I was done arguing, and I knew we just needed to be close. We were all we had in the world, on this little island together, just the two of us. No matter how differently we felt about sentencing or how we were dealing with it, all we could do was hold hands and get through this mess together.
Mia. The hardest part that day was pulling myself together so I could tell Peter's daughter, Sophia. I knew she was waiting for good news, and I wasn't sure how to break just the opposite to her. I decided all I could do was be honest, then encouraging. "We love you, sweetie," I said. "Please be strong. This will be over soon." When Peter's lawyer called me later that afternoon, I realized how much I needed that kind of pep talk myself. "I'm not going to give up," he said. "What?" I asked. I was genuinely confused. I felt so defeated I'd crawled into bed and expected I'd stay there for days. "I mean, I'm going to keep fighting. There's still hope. But you just keep supporting him. It's all you can do. Be the wife you've always been, that he needs you to be." He was right. And it was as true then as it is now. Being a good partner is the best I can do. Peter's done it for me, and I'll do it for him. When Peter called me the next day, literally the first minute he could get to the phone, we couldn't even speak. We just sat on the phone together and cried, feeling the exact same pain. For the first time, we couldn't hold each other up. We both felt so helpless that I started to wonder if my lawyer was all wrong. Maybe there isn't any hope, I worried. Then I managed
Val was trying to tell you your lawyer was all wrong. But again,
to choke a few words out. "I love you so much, Peter. Everything is going to be okay." "I love you too," he said, "and I'm sorry I let you down." "You didn't," I said. "I will always be proud of you." Even as Junior and Peter have gone off to serve their sentences, Olivia and I have never stopped feeling honored by what our husbands did. Especially now, when we've seen their cooperation rewarded in the biggest ways possible.
they saw their cooperation rewarded with almost the full sentence. They seen it rewarded with them almost allowing Jay to die from a septic shock in prison because they didn't believe him. When they turned down his COVID release, they didn't believe that he got sick. They got thanked for their cooperation with their wives being locked away on something that probably could have been an income tax thing that would have been a month or two problem, has turned into a 3.5 year problem. Like, who knows? But it is what it is. We ask if it's worth it. We always want to ask if it's worth it. They get to speak to their children today. They get to talk to their children today. They're alive. They get to see their children flourish. That's what they got out the deal. They got out the deal to the opportunity to have a future. Eventually. Cartel Wives, Chapter 33.
Bringing down El Chapo.
Holy.
Olivia. When Judge Castillo sentenced Junior and Peter, he acknowledged the risks they'd taken, recognizing that even though they were getting 14 years, they were actually leaving with life sentences. He said, "You and your family members will always have to look over your shoulders and wonder every time you're outside in a vehicle and you see a motorcycle come up behind you, if that is the motorcycle that is going to take your life.
Mia. At the time, those words were cold comfort to me. But now, I realized that he wasn't just stating the obvious, that what Peter and Junior had done was nothing short of putting their lives on the line. He was also recognizing our husbands, and by extension us, as people, not criminals.
Olivia.
Wait.
He,
I was
as much
distracted.
as-
Who was recognizing them? Who recognized them as people?
At the time, those words were cold comfort to me.
That even though they were getting 14 years, they were actually leaving with life sentences. He said, "You and your family members will always have to look over your shoulders and wonder every time you're outside in a vehicle and you see a motorcycle come up behind you, if that is the motorcycle that is going to take your life."
Mia. At the time, those words were cold comfort to me. But now, I realized that he wasn't just stating the obvious, that what Peter and Junior had done was nothing short of putting their lives on the line. He was also recognizing our husbands, and by extension us, as people, not criminals.
Olivia. He, as much as anyone, realized that we'd all be living the rest of our lives in grave danger. And because of that, Junior and Peter were going to be taken away to two of the most secure prisons in the country.
Mia. Under the umbrella of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, there's a little-known initiative called the Witness Security Program. Created in 1970 to protect informants who testify against drug traffickers, terrorists, members of organized crime, and other major criminals. It now serves only 500 inmates, which is less than 0.5% of the U.S. prison population. Because they're typically involved in ongoing federal investigations, these inmates are safeguarded with the highest levels of security and are kept at prisons off the radar. If there's even the slightest risk to them, whether from the outside or the inside, they're relocated to another prison immediately. Their identities are secret, their families are typically in hiding, as we'd be, and when they're released, they enter the Witness Protection Program and are protected by the U.S. Marshals.
Olivia. When Junior and Peter left sentencing, they were taken almost immediately to the separate federal prison to serve their 14-year sentences. For 6 of those years, however, they were credited for the time they served, meaning they'd see an additional 8 years behind bars. Right now, they live with former mob bosses, drug traffickers, hitmen, and kidnappers. They're surrounded by organized criminals, so in many ways, it's not that different than the life they'd lived before, except that each of these men is now a federal witness.
Mia.
They in there with Sammy the Bull and all of these other high-profile cooperators.
Their cooperation didn't stop when they went to jail either. They've kept working with the feds and signing extradition papers, leading to the arrest and extradition of cartel members including Mayito Flaco, Mayito Gordo, Felipe el Ingeniero, Cabrera Sarabia, Alfredo Vasquez Hernandez, a.k.a. Alfredo Compadre, Tomás Arevalo Renteria, La Puerca's sister, Guadalupe La Patrona Fernandez Valencia.
La Puerca's sister even got it, boy.
And El Mencho.
That's a long list, boy.
Its biggest cases. Mocomo's scheduled trial in February 2016.
Olivia. Before the trial date, the U.S. attorney from D.C. visited Junior with Mike Ferreira because they wanted my husband to be one of the main witnesses. There were several other witnesses, but the difference was that Junior's a U.S. citizen, and not only does he speak English, but he actually trafficked 1,800 kilos of cocaine he received from Mokomo into Washington, D.C. With Junior on the stand, jurors were going to be astounded at how close the cartel boss's drugs hit home. I did not want my husband to testify, and I told him as much. Somebody might kill us all, I said. He took me seriously, but he was firm. Liv, he said, they might reduce my sentence because of my testimony. A few more years home with our children could make a world of difference for them. That was just like Junior. There's nothing he wouldn't risk just to be there for his children. My worst fears came true before the trial, though. The witness list was leaked, and the family members of 2 cooperating witnesses were killed.
Damn.
One was the wife of Chino Anthrax, one of Chapo's main hitmen, and the other was Ray Zambada, El Mayo's brother's son. Granted, these murders both happened in Mexico, but I knew the cartels could easily cross the border, so I didn't feel safe. Still, nothing could change Junior's mind about testifying.
They act like the twins brought down the towers. Everybody was over there testifying. Chino Anthrax testifying. Mayo's son testifying.
He was determined, and the U.S. attorneys from D.C. and Chicago even debriefed him to get him ready for the stand. It never happened, though. The morning of the trial, Mokomo's attorneys learned that Junior was on the new witness list. We suspect he looked at his name and realized his case was sunk, that it was a slam dunk for the prosecution. So Mokomo pleaded out at the end of February 2016 and was sentenced in April to life in prison.
So Buddy pleaded out because he saw the list and said, me jodí yo, this guy can bury me. So Mokomo saw Jay on that list and he was like, I'm cutting a deal.
Mia. Olivia called me in April 2016 to tell me about a murder case she'd just seen on the news. She said 8 members of an Ohio family had been found shot, execution style, at their rural home. The hitmen left 3 young children, including a 4-day-old, alive, but the rest were pretty much slaughtered.
Damn.
Authorities found hundreds of illegal marijuana plants around the property, and a link to a Mexican cartel was suspected. That poor family, she said. This is a nightmare. Yes, I said, and we can't let it happen to us. Still, this is our life, and it's a real possibility, especially with the extradition of Joaquin Guzman Loera, a.k.a. El Chapo, the most wanted man in the world.
Olivia. During the first couple of years Junior was in prison, he'd sometimes get really serious, look at me and say, "They're going to find Chapo." "There's no way," I'd tell him. "He's too well hidden, too powerful." Year after year, though, Junior insisted that would change. He'd say it to me, the feds, and his lawyers. Nobody believed him, and they'd laugh and say it would never happen. After a while, everyone was so sick of hearing him, they'd all tell him at the same time, "Shut the fuck up."
Mia, Chapo had always been a ghost to me. When we were in Mexico, I'd overhear conversations between him and my husband and Junior, but I'd never met him. All I knew was that he played a huge part in their business, and every conversation with him was full of personality and ended really pleasantly. If he was just some voice way off in the distance to me, I imagined he was phantom-like to the world as well. There was no way anyone would ever haul him in.
They was on him. They was looking for him. They was trying to grab his ass. He was escaping through secret pathways and shit under bathtubs.
Olivia. But, sure enough, on February 22nd, 2014, it happened. El Chapo was captured by Mexican police at a beachfront hotel in Mazatlan.
Got him.
When Mia and I found out, you could have picked our jaws up off the floor. We knew it was almost unbelievable, But in this crazy life of ours, anything was possible. When the news settled in, though, the whole thing became nerve-wracking. I went to visit Junior that weekend, and we were sitting in the visiting room watching TV. Chapel was on every channel, with Junior and Peter's faces plastered next to his. Every time the guard changed the channel, whether it was the Spanish channel or CNN or whatever, you'd see the same thing. It was terrifying, and as I held hands with Junior, trembling, I started to think once again. My life has been hell since the night we sat at the kitchen table and decided to cooperate. And it's never ending. Was this really worth all this stress and...
Bro, think of the irony in that. It has not ended. It has not ended. It just keeps fucking going. It's like perpetual hell. It just keeps going. It keeps going. It keeps going. Some of the suggestions, maybe in hindsight, but life don't work in hindsight. Ain't no go back. You can't change it. You know, but there was a lot of questions and comments today in the chat about what coulda, shoulda, woulda been. Cause they could have escaped. They could have ran off. They could have changed their whole thing. They could have made a different decision. They made the decision that they thought was right, and they paid for it how they paid for it. So imagine what those other possibilities could have been. They could have been bad. They could have been amazing. Who knows? It hasn't ended yet, bro. So she's questioning this in 2017. She's questioning this like, man, when is this shit gonna end? Was it worth it? And it's still going on in 2024.
Faces plastered next to him, and it's never ending.
Crazy.
Was this really worth all this stress and heartache?
Was
Mia.
it worth it?
Then, on July 11th, 2015, El Chapo escaped, like Houdini himself, from his prison cell through a mile-long tunnel that had been burrowed underneath his shower stall and led to a nearby house.
Bro, that's some comic book movie shit right there, boy. Real talk. You know what I mean? Like the tunnel, the little motorcycle, the whole jab. That is some Marvel shit right there.
I was visiting Peter in prison the next day, which was a Sunday, when a prison security guard walked up to the table where we were playing a game with our kids. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm going to have to cancel your visit." "Why?" Peter asked, shocked. This hadn't happened in years. "Chapo was captured. We have to lock you up for security. And we're worried prisoners are going to start rioting." My heart dropped. I kissed Peter goodbye and was escorted out of the prison, and as soon as I felt the cold air against my skin, I lost it. Sure enough, that fear of the unknown that had haunted me for years crept up once again. I didn't talk to Peter for almost a week, but I saw his face everywhere on the news, and it was heartbreaking. All I could think was, I want more than anything to talk to him about this, but I just couldn't. Then I'd call his lawyer, who was encouraging, and said lots of helpful things, but he still didn't know what would come out of this situation.
Olivia. I called my lawyer too, and he mentioned that Junior and Peter were going to have to testify against Chapel. Because of that, it may be time for you to go into the witness protection program, he said. That was the last thing Mia and I wanted to do with Junior and Peter still locked up, so I wasn't convinced. If we do that, there's no guarantee we'll be close to them, I said. It might be smart, he answered. For the first time ever, I was starting to get a bad feeling that he might be right.
So remember, they turned down witness protection initially. Now they're imploring them like, yo, it's getting thick, it's going down. You know, they got the man in a dungeon somewhere. Maybe it's time for y'all. And I'm surprised that they even offered it to them, because really I figured they would be like, oh, we wipe our hands clean of you because you turned us down initially. The fact that the option is still on the table, I'm surprised by that.
Mia. Safety is always a concern for us. Olivia and I each have dozens of email addresses. One for our kids' teachers, one for our families, one for corresponding with each other about this book. When we call the cable company to report a problem, we have to remember which phone number we've given them. We even hire private investigators every few months to make sure there's no trace of us out there. In the weeks after Chapo escaped, Junior and Peter were all over the news.
It's a lot of counterintelligence, counter-security shit, man, that they doing over there. Some I spy shit going on over here.
Witnesses started coming out of the woodwork, and word about the case spread. People started playing songs called narco corridos, describing what the cartels would do to Junior and Peter if they found them. On blogs, people began threatening our families.
We need to see what them songs is about. We need to do a reaction to them records. Hopefully we don't get smashed with a copyright.
Average Joes who hadn't known who Chapo was for most of their lives wore shirts and hats with his face on it, and people dressed up like him for Halloween. I was disgusted. I couldn't believe people were looking at the most dangerous man in the world, one who'd killed an obscene amount of people, many of them innocent, as a celebrity.
He's a hero for a lot of people, you know what I'm saying? But I tell you this, you want the underdog to win when you're an underdog, right? You want them to come out on top. But you don't want them doing dirty shit to children and innocent people and women. You don't want that collateral damage, right? But that collateral damage is a part of life and is a reality of war, and it has been between countries as well as it is between factions, as well as it is between gangs, even law enforcement agencies that ride down on each other. But if the word is true that these guys were into underage girls and shit like that, like that underdog glory to me goes out the window, and you can't be one of them guys that I want to glorify. That's a whole different kind of low right there. That's a personal, evil, animal low right there. You know, not even animal, beyond animal, past slug. That's not an act of war where a whole bunch of people go down, innocent people go down. That's not a good thing either. But to make decisions in your own home, in your own bedroom about underage girls and stuff like that. Like, I'm trying to say this in the most, not get demonetized or knocked off the channel. I'm hoping y'all follow me right now. Once they get to that level, like once y'all at that level, like, oh man, I don't care what you did. It doesn't matter what you did, man. There's, I take what I take from it. That's it. Felix Reyes in the chat said he was a hero for the Twins at one point too. Yeah, I guess. Maybe. Or he was a plug. And again, we're sold what we're sold, and we only know what we know. I think of Benazir Bhutto. Benazir Bhutto, she was assassinated, and she had served time in all kind of dungeons, and she went through it. She was, to some, a freedom fighter, to some, an evil dictator, But I remember growing up seeing them demonize her on American television and put her perp walk moving slow and just make her look evil. So in my eyes, it was like, oh, that lady's like some kind of wild terrorist. I didn't know the story. I was just seeing her image on TV. Then I watched her documentary, Budo, and I said to myself, they totally painted a picture of this woman as something that she wasn't to me. And that's when I understood propaganda in a different way, and I understood programming and how they push things on the television to the people to make it look a certain way. But there's people that this guy's a hero to, and I'm not mad at you. He's your hero. That's cool. But if the rumors are true that he dealt with underage kids, then he's off my list of super gangsters.
I couldn't believe people were looking at the most dangerous man in the world, one who'd killed an obscene amount of people, many of them innocent, as a celebrity. Needless to say, all of this put Olivia and me at a huge risk. In 2014, we felt more exposed than we'd ever been.
Olivia. Chapo was in a Mexican prison for most of 2014. I've been to jail in Mexico, and believe me, it's different than in the United States. Someone like Chapo could have anything he wanted: money, his business, even women. In Guadalajara, we used to live near a drug kingpin named Caro Quintero, and our neighbors said he'd come home from prison to his mansion on the weekends. Mia and I knew people were going to help Chapo while he was locked up. And that's why we weren't at all surprised when he escaped.
Mia. Chapo got out through a hole in the shower floor of his prison on a Friday morning in the middle of July 2015. That weekend, Olivia and her kids were in town to visit me and Peter, and at first we all thought it was a hoax. Then, once again, we started seeing Junior and Peter's faces all over the news channels, and our lives became a big three-ring circus.
Olivia. "What are you going to do? He's out there," said Mia. "We'll be fine," I said. "We've been living this life for so long. We've been keeping ourselves safe for years and years." I always liked to sugarcoat everything, so I didn't want anyone to worry about us, but the truth was, we were terrified. Chapo had all the discovery of what exactly our husbands had said throughout their cooperation. In the drug world, betrayal is the ultimate death sentence, and we were literally driving ourselves crazy just thinking about it. It's like we became prisoners in our own minds.
Mia. We didn't stop feeling that way until the Mexican Navy's Special Forces captured him in northwest Sinaloa on January 8, 2016, just over 6 months later. Soon after that, Peter and Junior signed his extradition papers, which was so nerve-wracking. I kept thinking, when Chapo's lawyers receive them and see Junior's and Peter's signatures, he's going to lose it.
I think by that point he had lost it already. If you say he had all the discovery and knew what was coming, the extradition paper is just the cherry on top.
Damage was done, and we all waited nervously.
Olivia. Just over a year later, on January 19th, 2017, El Chapo was extradited to the United States. The next day, he pleaded not guilty to 17 indictments, and he's now in solitary confinement at the New York Metropolitan Correction Center in Manhattan. If Chapo stands trial, Junior and Peter will serve as the star witnesses against him, and their conversations on tape will serve as the damning evidence needed to convict him to the full extent of the law.
Mia. Because of that, Liv and I thought long and hard about going into the witness protection program. Now we have no choice but to enter that next chapter in our lives. We thought we could wait until our husbands are released from prison, but as mothers, we have to protect ourselves and our young children from the harsh realities we face. Chapo living on U.S. soil is very different than him hiding out in Mexico. Some of his kids live in the United States, and our husbands are going to be the star witnesses against him. How are we to know something won't happen to us before then?
So much family, so many people going to court proceedings, so many people crossing in the hallways, running into each other in bathrooms. Same way you ran into all them connections, ran into all those good relationships. Just as easy to run into somebody that let the cat out the bag on you.
Olivia. With Peter and Junior being the only people who've gotten Chapo on tape, the case officials were pulling together in Chicago was the strongest one. But I guess the U.S. attorneys in New York City fought a little harder to get him there. Mike Ferreira worked like crazy on this case since 2008, and more than anyone, we thought he deserved it. His time and attention were incredible. He and his team put their blood, sweat, and tears into getting Chapo, and if anyone knows the ins and outs of the case, it's the Chicago office. The reality of the situation is that we're terrified about Chapo being anywhere in the United States. When they extradited Vicente, we were scared out of our minds. The thought of Chapo here produces a much, much deeper feeling of fear.
Mia. Our husbands are the ones who put Chapo away, and his people want revenge because of it. Mexican cartels contain the most ruthlessly violent individuals in the world. all the people at the top believe in is making money and having power, and they'll do whatever it takes to hold it.
Olivia. Our husbands felt differently. They didn't think that world was worth losing their lives for. They wanted to walk their daughters down the aisle and watch their sons grow into extraordinary men. They just didn't believe in the cartel life any longer, and neither did we. But El Chapo did, and that's why he, and not our husbands, will die behind bars.
Appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for coming through today. Enjoy your Saturday. I'm gonna play JP's. Power chat real quick. Shout out JP for the $2 power chat.
Jonathan Pantria sent $2 salutes Chi my brother, Cartel members, and chat. I hope you are having a blessed and grateful Bartel Wives Saturday. Like and subscribe to the great quality content, it's free. Shout out to the Bears and my Higavella's Niners getting cooked.
All right, shout out JP for the $2 power chat. Saludos, Shail, my brother, El Cartel members in chat. Hope you're having a blessed and grateful Bartel Wives Saturday. Like and subscribe to the great quality content. It's free, don't cost you a damn thing. Shout out to the Bears and my Higavella's Niners getting cooked today, all right? It's a fricassee today, all right? Salutes, y'all have a great day. And enjoy the fights. Maybe we'll be in the Discord. Maybe we'll get in the voice chat. And I can't get clapped in there, right? We get in the voice chat and enjoy the fights and the games. So we'll see. I'll work it out with y'all in the Discord. Everybody else, make sure you tune in tomorrow for Il Cartel News, where we discuss if Ivan is behind all of these happenings that have been happening lately. All right? With that said, I will holla. Peace.